people of Christian background, is like, I, having been raised evangelical, frequently get bewildered that people who are not raised evangelical can read the Bible and like not see not see like the literalism that I like kind of instinctively read it with. And then like a lot of like non-evangelical people like are kind of astonished that I can't shake like the literalism from my reading when I do read
I
it.
feel that a lot. Again, not necessarily. I'm not familiar with like that in you specifically. I don't think we've talked much about
Mhm.
this, but with anyone, like again, when people really go for talking about the literal lead of it for or against it, it doesn't even. I don't feel like literal is the right word. It's like
Right.
you are. You're not reading it literally. You are taking a word in the text, deciding that word can only have one specific meaning and going. That's not really what literal means. Like
Yeah, I
you
mean like
already have decided what you're seeing and you stopped looking at the word itself. Like
This is what
yeah.
happened
and
when I tried to read the Bible from cover to cover. Didn't quite manage to in
yeah, again,
2023.
Yeah.
like
And I was thinking like, okay, I'm going to approach this as literally as possible. I'm not going to like try and read like my own stuff into it. I'm also not going to try and read for or against any particular theological viewpoint. I'm just going to read as naively as possible, which I guess is almost a very
Mhm.
Protestant framing too. Um,
Mhm.
and what I came away with does not resemble almost any theological framework that really exists. Um,
y'all read Book of
which
all
I mean
books
like
yet?
wait,
I've
what's
read the
that?
Bible.
The Colossal one in the Old Testament. It's
Oh yeah, no, I need
required
to.
reading, I think.
Yeah, I mean, I've like read like the Bible in like whole or in part, like repeatedly, of course. And like each time, like, I try to apply a different lens. And it's kind of interesting to apply it with a different lens. Obviously, like, as a kid, like, I was taught to read it relatively literally. Like, like there are some portions that are not meant to be taken like absolutely 100% literally, um uh not every single instance of the word day means an actual day. Not every single instance of like a specific like phrasing means something um literally that. Um but like um but like still, like, I would read like Leviticus 18:22, for instance, and say, okay, that definitely has no other real meaning other than that it is sinful to engage in homosexual penetrative sex. There is no way it could possibly mean anything
Actually,
else.
it's only that it's bad to do that when you are like starving in the desert, actually.
Yeah, I mean, like, there's that, but like, I tried,
I know,
then I
I'm being
tried,
silly.
That
yeah,
is
then
a
I like,
fair literal. Like when I was reading it ultra literally, I couldn't necessarily get around those
Yeah,
passages, like the commandment
this I don't
passages.
yeah,
know.
What's
or
weird is
like,
how much of the theological scaffolding is completely non-literal. But the
yeah,
commandment
I mean,
passages are the
like,
commandment passages.
yeah, I mean, like, reading it like later on, like with my more bizarre like perspective on the development of like Semitic religion, I get much more of just like this odd sense that like, um, well, for one, Elohim and Elohim and Yahweh. I still
Mhm.
struggle to say that word. I've been taught not to say that word. But Elohim and
Interesting.
Yahweh are like, that's more from like my Jewish background than from my Christian background, though. But like, they're not like the same entity. Like Elohim, as a matter of fact, was like one of like the instances
Yeah.
like I was taught to read. Like, that's one of the instances that like my like background was like, well, this isn't meant to be literal because like Elohim is a plural form.
Yeah.
The singular form would be Eloah. And so like the idea of using Elohim there is like the idea of like, in this interpretation, it would be like, Elohim refers to like the incomprehensible infinity of God, which can only be understood by humans as likening God to like a multiplicity, even
Yeah, I
though
was
there
about to
is
say.
really truly one
Actually,
unity.
it was foreshadowing the Trinity. It was epic
Yeah.
tropes.
Well,
Well, my
I've
Jewish
only
background would start yelling at you for saying that. But
I
go ahead.
I've only read like up to Deuteronomy. I want to read it in order. I'm partway through Deuteronomy, and I've also like read a couple random like Paul letters. But
Yeah.
um something that struck me was like how obviously like reading Exodus, you're like, okay, the other gods clearly like exist in some form. Like there's
Yeah.
like the Egyptian magicians have real power.
Oh
Like
yeah.
they can actually do things, you know?
Like there's like an interpretation that is gaining ground in like some circles of like evangelical Christianity that like when it says Elohim said we shall create the earth, that meant that there was like an actual council of gods that was like planning out the creation of the earth. And then
Mm.
when Elohim disappears from the text and it starts referring to like Adon or Yahweh or whatnot, or El Shaddai, then what that is the supreme God asserting himself after like the rest of the divine council has rebelled against him and
Wait.
assert.
Are you saying this is taking hold in like mainstream evangelical stuff?
The evangelical
It's
esoteric
starting to.
convergence is
Oh my
something
God, the
I'm
Mormons are
noticing
fucking
so
women. No, no,
much.
this is Mormon. This is Mormon shit. It's only Mormon shit. I guarantee you.
Well, hold on. I'm not saying it's like very mainstream in evangelical stuff, but it's starting to gain ground among like especially more of like the spiritual warfare flavored evangelicals. But
Yeah,
like
but I guarantee it's Mormon.
it is really honest. Again, from like my perspective, like reading this through like the history of Semitic religion, like this is much more of like kind of an accurate accounting of like how it went. Like Elohim, like the simplest explanation is that Elohim is plural because like there were multiple Elohim like planning this out. And then like the Yahwist source, like is very focused on like Yahweh as the um well, it vacillates a bit, and it vacillates throughout like the Hebrew Bible. And this is why I still think that like the book of Isaiah is like one of the most incredible like literary accomplishments in human history, is because like you still, while you're reading like the Torah for instance, you still kind of get the sense like Yahweh is just like the God of like this particular tribe. He's the God of like this particular tribe wandering around in the desert. He's not necessarily more than that, but he's very powerful, and he wants to make it known that he can kick all the other gods' asses. And then,
You really should read Book
over.
of All Books. This is what it's about. It's
Yeah.
sorry, not to interrupt, but again, it really is good
Okay.
at framing that as like, okay, not like spiritual warfare, but like uh, Old Testament as like behavior laboratory. God is
Mhm.
not acting as like a guy actor. He's not making these decisions and reacting. He is
Hmm.
undergoing this project, taking the line of Abraham and using that as like a bloody pen into deep history. It's almost not about
Hmm.
that moment in the present. He's saying, okay, here's a group of people who
Interesting.
have all the little flaws that all humans do. I'm going to put them at square one, and I'm going to kick them until they start learning about blood. And I'm going to do that for a very long time. And
It's an
forever written
alignment
into history,
experiment.
yes, forever written into history will be this line of blood and this weird, like, star-crossed, like, philosophy of the early forms of suffering, of the early forms of, like,
Yeah.
I don't know, fucking Naruto vengeance cycles. That's what Israelite
I
history
mean,
is. You know what I
I
mean?
mean, like,
And
with regards to like the Naruto vengeance cycle stuff, like I have to interject and say, like, once you get to the New Testament, like Rene Girard, who Gabe has been writing his little series about on his Substack, like,
mhm,
kind of comes to like similar ideas in a way,
yeah.
where he attempts to like prove the divinity of Christ by starting from an entirely secular anthropological framework of just basically like, like, okay, so all human desire is mimetic. Mimetic desire leads to rivalry. Rivalry leads to conflict. Conflict can only be diffused by the displacement of conflict onto a scapegoat who is then ritually murdered and
Mhm.
deified. And then, like, he says, like, basically, then his argument is basically like, humans have no way of escaping this on our own. Nobody who is human could possibly think of a better way to do it than this. So when Jesus comes along and he shows like a different way of doing this, then like he's gotta be God, because like there's no other way, right?
Yes, let's fucking go.
And I don't I remember reading, like, I saw Satan fall like lightning like a few years ago, and I found it to be like an absolutely electrifying experience. For one, he writes in a way that has like such this like, one of the things I find very interesting is, like, a lot of people don't point this out about Girard, but he writes in a way that has like this intense feeling of urgency. Like, he's like, okay, nobody has known this for all of history. Nobody actually understands what's going on. I'm going to let you in on a little secret, basically. And you better pay attention to this, because this is the most important secret you will ever know in your life. Um, but like, I'm not entirely sure how much I agree with Girard for a variety of reasons. Um, but in any case,
He's very
I do
similar
dig.
to
Yeah,
He's similar to DeMoss in this respect, and there's a lot of synthesis you can do between those two, like, historical teleologies, and both have that sense of urgency, and both do tap into, like, something, like, real and original, and I think in both cases, the biggest weak point is the anthropology, particularly when it comes to you are doing like most of your most solid historiography is within the Western tradition. I'm
yeah,
not sure you could possibly have the basis to say this is true of every culture that has ever existed.
yeah,
Like, even if you did have a committee of like 100 local experts doing this, and there are
yeah,
points where, like, I mean, DeMoss is. I think, like, I want to say he's bad on indigenous stuff, and then it's like there are points where he just takes things seriously that other people will culturally relativize reflexively. Like, I remember reading about some of the like genital mutilation initiation rites in like Joseph Campbell and stuff when I was a kid, and being like, that actually sounds pretty fucked up. But on the other hand, like, there's also that bit where DeMoss will like point out the like one of his examples of projective care that like Navajo mothers will like be extremely attentive to their baby, and then while nursing them, and then just pass them to another mother and forget about them, and I'm like, that seems like healthy if like
Yeah.
the
Yeah.
yeah. I mean, like, I mean, like,
Why? I'm curious.
I mean, in the sense that it's not that it's unhealthy to do otherwise, but it's that in the sense that from the baby's perspective, when they are not even really differentiating individual other humans yet, like
Yeah,
they don't
you're fucking.
care if like communal child rearing makes sense. There's no reason that like you're gonna mimetically,
mhm.
as it were, assume, oh, my personal mother does not care about me because someone else is nursing me now. Like that would not even occur. Like that would
Yeah,
be
I
the
mean,
Not.
same
like,
thing
Perhaps
as the
not.
breast being
Yeah.
removed and then coming back when it's the same person. Like
yeah, I mean, like, my thought is, like, unfortunately, like, the biggest weak points of Girard and, like, Damas are, like, also the most boring ones, which is that in
yes.
both cases, you have someone who is, like, pretty good at, like, one particular area of, like, human endeavor, and trying to come up with a theory of absolutely everything in the world based on
Yeah.
that. So like Demos, Demos is very, very good at like child developmental psychology circa 1950 and tries to like develop an entire theory of the world based on that.
Oh
Girard
Christ.
is really good at like literary analysis of mythology. Um and like specifically doing like kind of paranoid readings of like mythology and
Which
tries
is
to develop an
great. I
entire theory
mean,
of
I think the more paranoid readings like that are, the better. Um,
I mean,
right. It's so
I
easy to
mean,
take mythology as simply um just a fun story that you kind of tell people around you to kind of make them feel cozy inside. Um,
I don't disagree. Like,
I don't know. I
um,
think this just comes down to I feel like people I don't think religion is a helpful word in general. I don't know if myth is either.
Yeah, not at all.
I really think anything that's called religion is either or both cult or philosophy. Like again, just like pure control brainwash shit or like again an allegory for a school of thought.
But
And depending on
yeah,
which one, it's just different proportions of those two things.
I'm
the heuristic I basically see people using for like, is this a religion, is basically just resemblance to Christianity, and that's it.
Yeah.
I
you
saw that
see,
it when I was a kid there was a like elementary school that I like there was this program where like over March break you'd have these special enrichment programs where you'd go to like another school and they'd do like a week of some random special topic, and I had one of them in a Catholic school, and there was a like project on the walls of the classroom I was in that was like invent your own religion. I was like, this is the coolest fucking project I've ever seen. I would love to do this. But they all had this set of rules where it's like, they have to have a prophet, and they have to have a set of commandments, and they have to have a deity. And I'm like, okay, wait a sec. What about,
Yeah,
like.
giant.
yeah, yeah. Also, a synonym people often use for Christian, for not for Christian, for religion is
no,
faith. And
religion.
like, to my understanding, faith
No, I
is
would
like mainly a Christian theological thing, and like doesn't really have
Hmm.
that central role in many
Yeah.
religions.
Yeah,
Well,
even as like what I describe myself as a pretty devoted Christian, faith is not really a concept for me either. It's not really helpful to how I think about
Well,
beliefs in the first place. Again, personally, it just like it doesn't really enter into the conversation.
very tough.
well, like
Like,
there's a couple of things. There's a couple of things where I think like, well, for one, like my like evangelical background brain is yelling, "You're a heretic! You're a heretic! What are you talking about?" But also,
it's
you're
very
all heretics, but also, my my thought is that I think like I think religion is useful even beyond, like, like thinking of it as a category for, like, analogous to Christianity. In part, um, because, well, I don't think there's, like, any one common element that defines, what a religion is, or what religion without the A is. But I think, like, there is sufficient family resemblance that we can say, like, for instance, you know, I remember David Chapman, the meaningness guy, pointed out, like, in one of his blogs about, like, Vajrayana Buddhism, that a lot of Westerners have, like, a picture of Buddhism that it is, like, very minimal, that it is about, like,
Oh, buddy.
it's very minimal. It's about meditation. It's about, like, trying to, like, discover enlightenment. That it's, like, primarily about, like, the discourses of the Buddha and, like, the psychological thoughts of the Buddha. And then if you go to East Asia, you know, if you go to East Asia, you will find people not thinking about a lot of those things. You will find people using, like, Buddhist chants as blessings for everyday events. You will find people, like, saying prayers to the Buddha and to bodhisattvas. In other words, you will find something that kind of does, in a lot of ways, resemble, like, how we understand the word religion. And I think that there is, like, I do think that there is sort of, like, this tendency throughout human history toward, like, categorization of ways of practicing an engagement with reality around you, which can, like, which we can say, like, what makes religion and not philosophy or science is very simply that it is religion and not philosophy or science. What distinguishes philosophy from science and religion is that it is philosophy and not science or religion, and what distinguishes science from philosophy or religion is that it is science and not philosophy or religion, which I am actually ultimately borrowing this formulation from, like, triadology, funnily enough. But yeah, I think ultimately.
Wait, let's make a Trinity graph. We can make a Trinity graph with this. I think that solves it.
Yeah, I think like the central sphere with the would have to just be filled in with question mark, question mark, question mark, question mark, rather than
No,
anything else.
profit. You skipped
Wisdom.
Well,
now that's
I would have to disagree with that. I would have to disagree with that as, like, a known like, grumpy atheist, as well as rabid hater of, like, 90% of philosophy.
Can I okay, I have a bunch of poems I want to read. I don't want to go
Yeah,
first for the actual
sorry.
personal works reading.
Yeah.
But
Okay.
can I as relevant to this discussion, I want to read the first, like, 3 pages of Tolstoy's Gospel in Brief.
Okay, let's go.
I want to see what you guys think about it. This is just the preface. This is his little introduction, and I
Yeah.
want to see where this falls for you guys on the religion, philosophy, science scale. Let me take a drink of water. Okay. This short account of the gospel is my own synthesis of the 4 gospels, organized according to the meaning of the teaching. While making the synthesis, it was mostly unnecessary for me to depart from the order in which the gospels have already been laid out, so that one should not expect more, but actually considerably fewer transpositions of gospel verses than are found in the majority of concordances, which I'm aware. He's bragging about not fudging the timeline. In the Gospel of John, as it appears in my synthesis, there are no translations whatsoever. It is all laid out in the exact order as the original. The division of the Gospel into 12 or 6 chapters, if we were to count each thematic pair of 2 chapters as one, came about naturally from the meaning of the teaching. This is the meaning behind the chapters of the Gospel. 1. Man is the son of an infinite source, the son of this Father not by the flesh, but by the Spirit. 2. And therefore man should serve this source in spirit. 3. The life of all people has a divine source. It alone is holy. 4. And therefore man should serve the source in the life of all people. That is the Father's will. 5. Only serving the Father's will can bring truth, i.e. a life of reason. 6. And therefore the satisfaction of one's own will is not necessary for true life. 7. Temporal, mortal life is the food of the true life. It is the material for a life of reason. 8. And therefore the true life is outside of time. It exists only in the present. 9. Life's deception with time, the life of the past or the future, hides the true life of the present from people. 10. And therefore man should strive to destroy the deception of the temporal life of the past and future. 11. The true life is not just life outside of time, the present, but is also life outside of the individual. Life is common to all people and expresses itself in love. 12. And therefore the person who lives in the present, in the common life of all people, unites himself with the Father, with the source and foundation of life. Each 2 chapters share a connection of effect and cause. Besides these 12 chapters, the following is appended to the account. The introduction from the first chapter of John, in which the writer speaks on his own authority about the meaning of the teaching as a whole, as well as the conclusion from the same writer's epistle, likely written before the Gospel, containing some general conclusions of all that came before. The introduction and conclusion do not represent an essential part of this teaching. They are simply general views on the teaching as a whole. Although the introduction and the conclusion both could have been omitted with no loss to the meaning of the teaching, especially since they were both written by John and do not come from Jesus, I held on to them for their simple and reasoned understanding of Jesus' teachings, and because these sections, unlike the Church's strange interpretations, confirm one another and confirm the teaching as a whole, while presenting the simplest articulation meaning that could be attached to the teachings. At the beginning of every chapter, apart from a short summary of its contents, I also present corresponding words from the prayer that Jesus used as a model to teach his students how to pray. When I came to the completion of this work, I found, to my surprise and joy, that the so-called Lord's Prayer is nothing other than Jesus' whole teaching, expressed in its most distilled form in the very order that I had already laid out the chapters, and that each expression in the prayer corresponds to the sense and order of the chapters. Through the Gospel chapters again. 1. Our Father. Man is the Son of God. 2. Who art in heaven. God is the eternal spiritual source of life. 3. Hallowed be thy name. Let the source of life be holy. 4. Thy kingdom come. Let his power be manifest in all people. 5. Thy will be done in heaven. And let the eternal source's will come to be both in and of itself. 6. As it is on earth, as well as in the flesh. 7. Give us our daily bread. Temporal life is the food of true life. 8. This day. The true life is in the present. 9. And forgive us our debts as we forgive our debtors. Let not the mistakes and delusions of the past hide the true life from us. 10. And lead us not into temptation, and let them not lead us into deception. 11. But deliver us from evil, and then there will be no evil. 12. For thine is the kingdom and the power and the glory. It will be your power and strength and reason. In the third section of the more comprehensive account, which is still in manuscript form, the Gospels according to the 4 evangelists are thoroughly explicated without the slightest omission. In the current account, the following verses are omitted in my telling. The conception, the birth of John the Baptist, his imprisonment and death, the birth of Jesus, his lineage, the flight with his mother into Egypt, Jesus' miracles in Canaan and Capernaum, the casting out of demons, walking on water, the withering of the fig tree, healing of the sick, the resurrection of the dead, Christ's own resurrection, all references to prophecies fulfilled in Christ's life. These verses are omitted in the current short account because, since they do not contain any teaching but only describe events that occurred before, during, or after Jesus' ministry without adding anything, they only complicate and burden the account. These verses, no matter how they are understood, do not contain contradictions to the teaching, nor do they contain support for it. The only value these verses held to Christianity was that they proved the divinity of Jesus to those who did not believe in it. For someone who perceives the flimsiness of a story about miracles, but still does not doubt Jesus' divinity because of the strength of his teaching, these verses fall away by themselves. They are unnecessary. That's all I'm going to read.
Yay!
Yay. I love that.
Yay!
Again,
It's all resolved. All right, we can go to bed now.
yay.
This
I
is
was
pretty
just
much how the United Church I go to sort of teaches it.
yeah.
I
I just
haven't
think they came
ever read Tolstoy, by the way.
Uh-huh.
But I was told his kind of interpretation of I guess the Bible and kind of like what it means to be a Christian. Yeah, from my brother who did read a bit of him.
Uh-huh.
But so I did expect some of this, but not all of it.
Yeah, it really
It's
is.
interesting. It is interesting comparing it with like say like a Feuerbach, which is it's not the same. Like clearly, it doesn't just kind of go straight to the kind of the dialectic of kind of like self and the kind of and I guess the other that is that like Feuerbach's very in a hurry to kind of like subsume. It goes with a different approach. But it seems to accomplish something relatively similar. I'd like to hear what you guys think of it.
like I think like I have like I'm already relatively familiar with Tolstoy. I read him. I read like a decent amount of this like when I was a kid. But like I have like kind of three like I have like some kind of three like I have like kind of three like contradictory responses, I guess. The first would be like, my youthful like evangelical response, which is to say, like, with regards to like the sort of triad of like science, philosophy, and religion, like what I would say in that mode is like what this is trying to do is like it's trying to remove like the essence of Christianity out of Christianity. Like ultimately from this frame, like like realization of the present is all well and good, but the essential thing is that Jesus literally died for you on the cross, and that you are damned without his specific person.
Yeah,
Regardless,
and that is the whole thing. I think those are like the big two views. Either like Christ's teaching is entirely worthless if he wasn't divine. Like, okay, it is just some random street preacher if he wasn't God himself. Or Jesus' teaching is so true that actually doesn't even matter whether he was divine or not. It's that perfect.
Right. And I would
again,
also say that, like, what followed from, and this is to some extent what I was arguing with Anna, although I don't think that her position is even necessarily exactly as you glossed it there, because as you glossed it there was very much coming out of the evangelical thing, and she's coming at it from the Catholic thing where there's even more baggage. But the sort of, like, when that became the essence of Christianity is what's of historical interest to me, and what I've never even been able to entirely pin down or determine, because it is as far you have to reach really far to determine that from anything Jesus says. Like,
yeah,
and
the
that is the thing.
idea
That's what the whole book is saying. Like the rest of the introduction is like, I hate it's just Tolstoy going, I hate the church, I hate the fucking church, I hate the church. And then like the entire rest of the book is like, yes, I am going to strip this completely of anything like supernatural as people understand supernatural.
Now, I don't
I'm
think you
going to only
necessarily.
focus.
Sorry.
What?
I don't think you necessarily need to strip everything supernatural. And I don't
Oh,
think that
I agree.
necessarily
I'm saying
follows
this is what
from.
Tolstoy is doing here. That's it.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah.
Again,
No.
like it is a very intentional thing to go like, okay, I don't care about the story. I only care about like the message Jesus was preaching. I only care about the teaching.
Yeah.
And like that teaching, as displayed in Gospel and Belief, is give all your money to poor people right now. Do it right fucking now. Stop. No, you have to do it right now. You can't just believe it's the right thing to do. You can't do it later. You have to give all your shit away right now or go away. Like,
Yeah, I mean, like the other two responses I were about to pose were like, um, the second response that I have is like, my grandmother's voice, which is enthusiastically signing on to every single point of this, including like the fuck the church stuff, except still saying, but also all of it is meaningless without like the very specific sacrifice of Jesus, the historical person on the cross, because he is literally God. Just
I think
holding
that's
the
about where
two
I am
positions
too.
at once. And so like that's like part of the and so like that's the other part of like the frustration is like, if we're talking about like religion is actually practice, like a lot of the time, like, it's perfectly possible for someone who is exactly the sort of like stodgy doctrinaire literalist that Tolstoy has a problem with to completely absorb his critique and turn it into their own without changing like anything that he kind of like disliked about them. My third response is like, while I do very strongly appreciate like, the give all of your money to the poor right now stuff, like, I ultimately just have like a problem with the understanding of like the world as flowing from like a benevolent source. And this is like kind of influenced equally by like, my secular like self-training as well as like my Jewish background to a great extent. Where like ultimately Judaism does affirm like the goodness of reality, but you have to go through at least the stage in Judaism of like thinking of it as a problem. You're not allowed to like resolve, like in certain quarters of Judaism especially, you're not allowed to resolve the problem. You're not allowed to like look at the world and say, look at how like manifestly imperfect this is. Look at how manifestly imperfect this is, and look at how much suffering there is, and look at how much like could be resolved so easily from like a zoomed out perspective. And you're supposed to focus on that. You have to focus on that. And like in certain quarters of Judaism, like, you're really not supposed, like, the conclusion is not, well, of course it is imperfect, but it springs from a benevolent source, therefore we must trust in that benevolent source. But rather, often it just ends up in, we don't know what the fuck benevolence means in this context. We say
Exactly.
God is good, and we are instructed to believe God is good, but that goodness could just as easily consist of like the goodness of Cthulhu eating his most devoted
I'm,
practitioners first.
I'm,
I just don't
I'm
get this.
Okay, wait. I get it
I'm
because
true.
okay, we're exploring different sides of, I guess, source. As I've said before, source is reversible. Like source as we use it implies like a temporality or whatever. When again, my whole
Yeah.
sort of coming back to God was just like listening to Credence Justitiam and thinking, okay, if I am to believe that ultimate goodness is possible at all, then it already exists in whatever future in which, like, we achieve it, and whatever sort of, like, everything else follows from that. You can just time reverse it from there. Like, and that also
Yeah,
must entail the paradox of the evil of your own condition existing. But
yeah,
all of this, the fact that we keep collapsing on paradox, and like Christianity in particular is infamously a religion of paradox, although I think any mature religion is. And to come back to the question of
yeah.
what is religion, like, the other question, I guess the
Well,
discomfort with something like Tolstoy's Gospel in Brief can always be summed up in, well, if you can sum up the gospel to this, like, what is the point of having the gospel? Why not just say this? Which is itself this very, like, it's similar to the logic around religion
right,
that
right.
somebody like Brandon Sanderson sort of grapples with in depicting a god that actually sort of sets up the world to make modern technology convenient when people come to it or something. And the
Mhm,
but here we're answering our own question because all of these nuances are present in the texts. They're
mhm.
just not they're not present in this particular distillation, as good a distillation as it is, which almost comes down to a kind of literary justification. That I mean, there is a reason Jesus kept talking in parables. Like, he doesn't just do his teaching in,
Oh my
like,
god, Gospel and Brief is so fucking good on the parables, by the way. It's one of my
okay,
favorite parts.
Oh
okay.
yeah. Oh, I trust that. Like a couple of interjections. The first one just being like, well, when I'm saying source here, like for one, like I don't necessarily mean like a temporal source. I mean it like as like, interchangeable with like the notion of like absolute or grund or like whatever name that like you might want to call it in order to like distance like the more anthropomorphic connotations of like God the Father, for
Yeah.
instance. um uh so there's not I don't mean to imply any like inherent temporality there. Um the other thing is just like oh fuck. The other
So
thing is
true,
just like
Angie.
the other the other thing is just like with regard to like the paradox, like one of the things I think about is like the magical world of like the early well, not the early is not the right word, like roughly like 200 BC to 200 or 300 AD Eastern Mediterranean,
Mm-hmm.
which you could honestly, to a great extent, kind of categorize like Christianity within,
Yeah.
um, where a lot of the time you look at like this sort of milieu, which which produces Christianity, which produces various like sort of apocalyptic offshoots of Second Temple Judaism and Hellenistic Judaism and like the Greek magical papyri and like various mystery cults. And a lot of the time they come to like this kind of weirdly modern conclusion, um and a very strikingly pessimistic one. If you read the Greek magical papyri, I think like those are like actually very illuminating for how like religion was practiced by like a lot of people throughout history. The Greek magical papyri just generally portray like divinity as something horrifying and malevolent. Um, and like I remember slight tangent. I remember reading like some stuff produced by like members of like the Slavic native faith, because I have like this very odd fascination with like that whole cultural milieu. And I saw one produced by like one of the more like historically accurate reconstructionist branches of it online, and they were saying like, one of the things you have to be aware of is that like if you feel called to practice the Slavic native faith, you are engaging, you shouldn't come to it with like, this sort of mystical hippie, like I want to get back in touch with nature and the land thing. Because all the evidence points out that our ancestors were not really venerating these gods. Our ancestors were not really venerating these gods as like benevolent or like even like kind of neutral, depictions of nature. Um, or personifications of the natural forces. Personifications of the natural forces they were, but our ancestors were like fucking starving to death and drinking polluted
Yup.
water and having to contend with like animal attacks and shit like that. So they weren't like going up to the idea of like, like the idea that the gods of nature should be like this sort of like benevolent fairy force is like a very modern idea. Pre-modernity,
What a really
our
fucking psycho
ancestors were
idea.
like,
That stuff is weird as hell.
yeah, like our ancestors were looking at these gods of nature and like seeing these monsters that had to be
Bro, stop
that
killing my
couldn't
kids.
that couldn't be like fought, but that had to be propitiated. And like the Greek magical papyri like represent this sort of idea as well. A lot of like the Eastern Mediterranean stuff from that time period even comes to this sort of conclusion, like, um like if you look at some of the mystery cults, for instance, there's the idea that like, there is no ultimate creator, there is no ultimate divinity. This is all just chaos that's just cleaved from itself, and any potential goodness kind of arises like by accident. Like a lot of like the saviorist sects like of that time period were just like, everything is chaos, everything is darkness and misery, what the fuck is happening to us, we're cast into
Hell.
this like hell realm, but here's this guy who comes along and like puts like fucking puts the sun in his place. We better like get on this guy's side because he could like actually help us out here.
Yeah, I think all of this is again one already in the sort of
Yeah.
in the paradox, and it is still, I guess, essentially reversible in that if
Mhm.
you hold there to be a meaningful position from which to morally condemn this cosmic chaos at all, and if you hold that source capable of victory just in the very fact and the faith of your action, then
Mhm.
you can already reverse that into an ontological position. I guess a
Yeah.
lot of this reversibility thing this is a very me like framework. I feel like I'm almost treating it like supersymmetry, but I did in terms of the like Mediterranean magical worldview also did want to like point out that the sort of the modern secularizing impulse to remove the supernatural dimension, like that can be separated from the like critique of the kind of Pascal's mugging dimension of mainstream Christianity, in that again Jesus is like, he does teach all this stuff that Tolstoy's talking about, but he also spends 50% of the time teaching, like giving explicitly supernatural teachings that see like the supernatural things aren't just demonstrations. Like John uses them that way in particular to like show him fulfilling all the prophecies and shit, but like no, the supernatural is part of Jesus' action. It's part of what he does in the world in enacting his own teachings. And he also teaches you can also do this to a degree that, taken literally, almost no church except like some of the really weird charismatic ones takes seriously.
Snake handler.
That's another one of the things that really jumped out at me. And that, to some extent, like, as much as I'm doing these, like, reversibility moves, there is a way in which, like, to steelman the sort of, like, transcend the absolute specificity of Jesus or whatever, like, the possibility to do that sort of miracle if you are living in a magical cosmic horror world is, like, a game changer. Like, and, or for that matter, if you are living in a modern materialist mechanist, like, pessimistic worldview,
Mechanist.
it's a
I like
game
that.
change. Is a game changer. Like, if you sort of conclude that for this or that, like, information theoretic reason, there's no way for all of humanity to be happy, or that, like, the sort of, like, laws of human psychology will inevitably, like, the only way to stabilize them is these never-ending Girardian laws of sacrifice, say.
Or that there's
If
no
you can,
free will.
yeah, or that there's no free will, or,
No, I
like,
still
even
don't
just
need-
in the
whatever.
we don't need to do every undergrad philosophy thing. Even to bring it down to earth, like, in our current situation where there are, like, 4 or 5 X risks going and basically no, like, concerted human effort that isn't trying to accelerate them. Being able to do miracles would be one of the bigger pivotal acts I can imagine. So, if there is any real capacity for that, I'm very interested in unlocking it. And yeah, we
Yeah.
can continue this when next week I will have some of my Jesus Christ Shaman King fanfic to read. And
Oh.
Awesome. I remember you
Maybe
mentioned
Hell
that.
yeah.
maybe I'll
Woo!
even invite Anna into debate if anybody's interested in that. But we should get to the
I
actual
am
readings. Yeah?
incredibly interested
Amara?
in
Okay,
that.
just like
I'd hang
um
out. I'm not doing debates, but I'll
Cool. That's
chat.
fine. No, I think
yeah,
that's a way of framing it that
yeah.
actually avoids some of the problems of that. So, actually, I think that's what I
Yay.
want to do. Um,
My final footnote, for what it's worth, is like I'm not sure if this is a quirk of my own consciousness or not, but like whenever you mention, like, like there being like a standpoint on which to, like, posit that there is a problem with the world that must be fixed, like that's always very odd to me, because like I always hear this and then I just think, like, like, does there need to be a standpoint? Can't it
no,
can't
that's
like
faith.
can't yeah.
Okay, who
Should we
wants to
actually
go
do some
first?
readings now?
Yeah.
I'll go first.
Sure.
Okay. So the first part of this is something that's like a somewhat modified version of something I already read, but the rest of it is completely new, and this is pretty close to a finalized, I think. So let me get a drink of water. Once upon a time, there was a young princess who had lost both of her parents. For long days, she sat at the graves of her mother and her father, grieving them ever so quietly. She did not cry. She stood vigil with dignity, as her dignity was all that remained to her. One day, a traveling prince appeared before the princess, mounted upon a beautiful white horse. His manner gallant, his smile kind, the prince enveloped the princess in the scent of roses and gently wiped the tears from her eyes. Little one, who endures such hardship all on your own, I lay before you this plea. Do not ever forsake your strength or your nobility. The princess gave her vow never to forsake her strength or her nobility. As a token to remember this day, allow me to bestow this ring. The princess was heartbroken to hear he would depart again so quickly. We shall meet again, shall we not? This ring will guide you wherever I dwell. Could the ring the prince gave her be considered anything but an engagement ring? Now this was all well and good, but so impressed was she by him that the princess vowed to become a prince herself one day. Was that really such a good idea? Saga 1, The Rose Bride. Chapter 1, Interduellum. A star shall come out of the heavens. Two schoolgirls sat on a picnic blanket under a tree, hidden from the sky. One had wavy brown hair pulled into a ponytail, forming an S shape on the back of her round head. She was dressed in an ordinary girl's school uniform. The other had shoulder-length pink hair, worn down. She wore a boy's school uniform that had been modified about as much as a uniform could be without crossing the bounds of the dress code. It was dark blue, paired with shorts the same color as her hair. The brown-haired girl dug in her bag, eventually pulling out 2 bentos and placing one of them in front of the other girl with some amount of ceremony. As I promised, my new onigiri recipe. Now, I think it's pretty good, but it needs my lady Utena's approval before I can say it's perfected. She gazed at the other girl expectantly, watching her open the bento and take a bite. Utena said with her mouth full, nodding. Delish. She swallowed. This is probably the best onigiri I've had in my life. Wow. Good job, Wakaba. Wakaba wiggled. Yes! Thank you. How'd you make it? The flavors are umimiso, shiso leaves, and white sesame seeds, and I did that thing where you use salty water to wet your hands when forming them. Oh, I haven't heard of that. You really are just full of cooking knowledge. Well, I did get it from a magazine, but thank you. You know what they say, though, Utena. If you love a girl's cooking, you had better propose to her before someone else does. Do they say that? No? Tangentially, you ever notice how most professional chefs are men, even though women have historically done most of the cooking? Maybe you could become a pro chef and help break the glass ceiling or whatever. Wakaba pouted. Utena, you're getting analytical when I'm being romantic again. Utena placed a hand on her chest. I'm sorry. You're completely right. Wakaba, I hope you already understand that it would be the deepest honor imaginable for me if I were granted the privilege to eat your cooking every day for the rest of my life. Wakaba's cheeks reddened. Really? You mean that? Utena grinned. Of course. Although, if you really want to be romantic, I picked up an esoteric bit of advice while reading about the topic the other day. This might sound counterintuitive, but picking your nose directly before serving food is considered to be poor strategy. Wakaba blushed furiously. I did not! Now, you raise an interesting hypothesis, but I distinctly remember seeing it. And when a behavioral pattern is already established, the probability that such an observation would be made in error. Mean! Mean! Wakaba stood halfway up and fell on her, weakly hammering at her with closed fists. Utena uncontrollably, shielding herself with one arm and ruffling her best friend's hair with the other. After recovering from Wakaba's assault, Utena scratched her head and said, But really though, how's it been with you-know-who? Wakaba sighed. I gave him a love letter a couple days ago, but I don't have any response yet. Utena scoffed. It's so ignoble of him to leave a girl hanging, especially a girl like you. Well, I'm sure he's busy, and maybe he just needs time to think about it. He shouldn't need so much time to think. I'm busy too, and I have never taken more than 48 hours to answer a love letter. Even once from guys, and I find those actively annoying to receive. Okay, but you're you, and he's normal. Are you sure you aren't letting your biases color your view? Utena smiled gamely. I am absolutely letting my biases color my view. Utena. Oh, come on. My distaste for the type of guy who doesn't work really hard at being virtuous has served me pretty well in life so far. It's well calibrated. What do you want me to do? Sounds like an excuse to me. Guess I'll table it for later evaluation. Wakaba started to say more, but cut herself off. The girls took a few minutes to eat in earnest. Rice stuck to the corner of Utena's mouth, and she used a purple handkerchief to wipe it off. Oh, I haven't seen that before. Where'd you get it? Wakaba pointed at the handkerchief with a half-eaten rice ball. This? Utena scratched her head sheepishly. One of my fans gave it to me yesterday because I had to blow my nose. I told her I'd wash it at home and return it today, but she's absent, so I figure I'll just wash it again and bring it tomorrow. Let me guess, she told you could keep it, but you insisted on returning it. Utena blinked. Yeah. How did you know something so specific? You don't read romance manga, do you? No, I've never been in love, so I don't think I would find it relatable. Wakaba snorted. That poor girl. Go and read some if you want to find out. If you want to find out how I know, I'll put it on my list. In the distance, the bell signaling the end of lunch rang out. Utena groaned. Time for history. Utena's history notebook was blue. Growing up, she felt that yellow was a better color, but in high school, she felt she had to swap to blue. It was full of doodles. After history class, Utena had a free period. She decided to take a walk around the more scenic parts of campus. Eventually, she came to a stop next to a pillar across from the rose garden, verified the ground was dry, and sat down cross-legged to absorb the scenery. If the plaque on display was to be believed, the rose garden was a donation by the acting chairman of the school, one Otori Akio. The garden was fashioned in the shape of a bird cage, and purportedly contained every species and color of rose yet discovered. Utena sat daydreaming, taking in the rose scent and considering the bird cage's shape. It's sort of neat how man-made objects converged to yet more perfect, yet more precise geometric shapes as technology progressed. The bars of the cage were arranged in an almost perfect circle. Maybe it made things easier to mass produce. After an indeterminate period of time had passed, a gorgeous girl with brown skin and bright purple hair approached the garden. She looked to be ethnically Indian. The girl carried a gold-colored watering pail into the cage and began to tend to the flowers. I guess she's in the botanical club, Utena mused quietly. It was a reasonable guess. Something like 5 minutes after the girl's arrival, a tall green-haired boy strode towards the garden. Anchi! He shouted with a scowl. Both Utena and the girl, presumably named Anchi, jolted. Anchi exited the bird cage and gazed at the ground. Why were you absent from our rendezvous? You already know that this period is designated for our quality time together, and yet you are here, tending to roses. Anchi flinched. I'm very sorry, Saranji-sama. Did not ask for your apology. I asked for an explanation. I expect you to make it a good one. I sent a note. As he raised his hand to slap the girl, Utena broke out of her stupor and leapt to put herself between Anchi and the man. His slap landed on Utena's raised arm. The man snarled, "What the fuck?" and punched her hard in the sternum. Utena landed on her back, crying, That's enough, a new voice barked. As Utena staggered to her feet, she saw a red-haired boy restraining the man. Anchi was still there, fists anxiously clenched and raised to her face. The red-haired boy spoke imperiously. Sayonji, there is zero tolerance for improper conduct from our student council members. That seemed to bring Sayonji to his senses. He growled and strode away, shaking off the red-haired boy's grasp in the process. Anchi trailed him. Utena gasped for breath. She had acted too quickly to form a plan, and Sayonji's lack of hesitation caught her completely off guard. She replayed the events in her head, attempting to reconstruct what had actually happened. That hadn't been a fight. That had been immediate and total defeat. Belatedly, she prodded her chest to check for damage, wincing. Nothing seemed broken. The red-haired boy extended a hand. I must beg you to forgive my friend's brutish indiscretion. To think that he would strike a woman! Rest assured I will be speaking with him. Utena shook his hand automatically, staring past him. I am Kiryu Toga, Student Council President. Pleased to make your acquaintance. I didn't catch your name. Tenjo Utena. Charmed. It is with deep regret that I must prematurely depart, for my next class is beginning shortly. I hope to have the fortune of meeting you again, Tenjo Utena-kun. You were very gallant. Toga departed. Utena looked around to verify that Anchi was okay, but failed to locate her. Sayonji, she muttered to herself. The name rung a bell, but the mental context in which she had previously heard it was so alien right now, it took several moments to recall. Sayonji, the guy Wakaba has a crush on, the dueling champion? That guy? Utena entered her final class of the day a few minutes late. After a quiet apology to the teacher, she plodded over to her desk behind Wakaba, ignoring the latter's quizzical glance. Wakaba stealthily passed her a note. What happened? You're late, and you look all messed up. Utena scribbled on the note and passed it back. Messed up how? You're moving weird, and your hair has grass in it. What happened? I'm not entirely certain passing notes is the best way to talk about it. Okay, but it'll bother me all period if you don't tell me now, and then I won't learn anything. Una started to write, it'll also bother you all period if I tell you, but stopped upon realizing that telling someone, I would tell you this, but it would worry you, is enough to make them worry more. She sighed and got out a blank piece of paper. Okay, I got in a fight with Sionji, that Sionji. He was about to hit a girl, I ran in to defend her, and he hit me instead. Fortunately, one of his friends showed up right then and forced him to leave. When Wakaba finally passed the note back, there were a bunch of faded marks from repeated eraser usage. I believe you. Why was he about to hit her? Did you get her name? It seemed like a lover's quarrel. He called her Anchi. I'm assuming that's her given name. Oh, that would probably be Himemiya Anchi. She handles some of the ceremonial aspects of the dueling games. Purple hair, right? I've heard she tries to seduce whoever the current champion is, so it makes sense she'd be around him. I don't want to be insensitive, but it really seemed more like he was interested in her, and like he hit me. Okay, you were right. Note passing is a terrible way to talk about this. Una gazed at her ring for a moment, then opened her math notebook and started paying attention to the lecture. It was a lovely 5-subject notebook with a white cover. She took extra care for it to be usable as reference material in years to come, and she already had 2 filled notebooks from previous years stored in her dorm. Sayonji Kyosuke, the man who had so handily knocked her to the ground that afternoon, was the reigning champion of Otori Academy's dueling games, a tradition unique to the institution. Utena was given to understand from the times Wakaba had gushed about it that the games were usually played by teams, but Sayonji was famous for fighting without a team. This struck Utena as rather stupid. Even if he was able to win without a team, why take the handicap? Wakaba said she just didn't get it. Utena also thought it was weird for them to be called dueling games when they were played by teams, and Wakaba had informed her that the true duel was the mental duel between the team captains. Sionji apparently undercut this narrative, winning by raw instinctual talent rather than strategy and team play. It was for this reason that he was nicknamed the Malachite Beast. With all this clouding her mind, Utena decided that trying to pay attention to the lecture was a lost cause. Before she knew it, the day was over. After the bell rang, Wakaba pivoted in her seat to face Utena, a smile on her face. Before you say anything, I don't want to talk about it. I just want to have some time to think things over. Sounds good. Utena couldn't think of an alternate topic. Wakaba considered her for a moment. You should tell me about that ring. It has the school's symbol on it, right? Where'd you get it? Oh, this? Utena held up a hand. I've had it for as long as I can remember. Sometimes I dream a prince gave it to me, but it's one of those things where you can't tell whether you had the dream because the memory is real, or you only think the memory is real because you dreamed it. But why does it have the same rose as the school's symbol on it? Utena's cheeks reddened. Well, in the dream, the prince always says, "This ring will guide you wherever I dwell." And so when I saw that the ring had the same symbol as the school, I asked my social worker to let me apply. I don't actually think I'll meet him here, but he seemed so cool I couldn't really help it. Wakaba snickered. Ah, I see. Even you have girly fantasies sometimes, Utena. Utena blushed hard. It's not like that. I want to be like him, not get swept off my feet or anything. That's an awfully specific image to bring up. Utena made a discontented noise. Wakaba giggled. Wow, I can't believe I never got this out of you before. A whole new side to my princely Utena. If you talk about this new side over much, you won't be seeing it going forward, Utena groused. Wakaba zipped her lips dramatically, then got up. Let's get going. I'm hungry and want to get home soon. The girls walked out of the classroom together. On the ground floor, there was some sort of commotion going on in front of the bulletin board. There was a crowd of male students, some of whom were derisively laughing. Utena and Wakaba approached in curiosity. What's going on? Utena asked. A student in front of her turned around. Someone put up someone else's love letter. One of the students at the front of the crowd held up the letter between 2 fingers, reading in falsetto. Sometimes I daydream about dancing with you. Your smile, the smile you never show anyone else, is so kind. It's silly of me, I know. He laughed with the crowd. Utena muscled to the front of the crowd and ripped the letter out of the boy's hand. What the hell is funny about this? Do any of you expect a girl to open her heart to you if this is how you react to vulnerability? You see vulnerability and your instinct is to mock it, to crush it? None of you are men. Each and every one of you is a pathetic little boy. One of the boys refused to be cowed. Come on. You know that girls would do the exact same thing if one of our love letters to them was put up there. Turnabout is fair play. Utena poked him hard in the chest. If you let other people's worst behavior define fair play, there is no meaningful limit to your depravity. I'm sure if you asked those hypothetical girls to justify themselves, they would say the same of you. He blinked. What does depravity even mean? Stop using big words to sound smarter than you are. It means terrible behavior. There is no limit to how terrible your behavior will be. And why should I care what a moralistic bitch of a little girl has to say about my behavior? Utena was suddenly distracted, looking over the boy's shoulder. Wakaba's eyes had grown teary, and she ran away. Utena ran after her. Huh, can't win an argument, so she runs away. Utena suppressed the urge to turn around. Wakaba was more important. When Utena caught up, she saw Wakaba crouched behind a bush, sobbing. She came to a stop in front of her. That was your letter to Sanji, then? Utena asked quietly. Wakaba nodded and continued to sob. Utena stewed for a moment, then stamped her foot. Wakaba, I'm sorry, but fuck that guy! Fuck that guy! You don't have to tell me, Utena, I know. He sucks. He's a terrible person, and I shouldn't love him so much. I just can't help it. I still love him. I love him right now. I'm sorry. I'm sorry. No, no, no. I'm not telling you how to feel. I'm telling you what I'm going to do. I'm going to humiliate him in front of the entire school. Wakaba coughed, then looked up at her in confusion. What? How? I'm going to crush him in the dueling games. Shadows on a wall. I wonder, do you know what I wonder? I wonder what you wonder. The shadows titter. I wonder if our hero knows just what she's getting into. Brave hero, save me, gallant prince. Her toolbox will be useless if her mind be rulesless. For rules and law are different. The great cloud the distinction to condensate dominion. I think you meant consolidate. The shadows titter. And that's it. That's the end of chapter 1.
Oh yeah.
Rational
Actually,
fic-
yeah, I can really tell a more developed tone than last time you read this.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Mm.
Rational fic tendencies and genre, like, tropes aside, I really like how much this is feeling like just Utena in a high school I could have grown up in. Like, this feels like it's getting like the non-stylized high school experience and just completely doing everything that the show does straight in a way that, like, if somebody was doing, say, a Netflix American reboot of Utena, like, all the most annoying decisions that everybody would get mad at it for making, it would be making precisely because it wants to adapt to that sense of reality, but only has TV as a substitute.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'm pretty pleased with how this is shaping up to be. I after I finished this, I wrote like a full half of chapter 2. Um and I have some plans for how I want to write the duel. I have a lot of ideas for how I want to write the duel. Um I'm 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 trying to like I'm trying to like thread the needle between making it like poetic and also making it like like something where you can sort of guess the solution ahead of time if you think hard enough.
Are you gonna
Um,
Mm.
go for dual lyrics?
I'm still thinking about it. I'm still thinking about it. I have like a bunch of random poetic like um like lines that I might use somewhere in it. But It hasn't.
So
I haven't fully formed my like paradigm for what duels look like. In the
Unironic idea. I think you could have. This is going to tie in another reading, but I think you could have, like, the dual lyrics, like the songs, the musical
Mhm.
element, be completely diegetic as something that exists in, like, a hyper localized poetic tradition, the way, like, college songs and shit used to, or for
Oh my
that
god,
matter,
I love
something like
that.
Yeah, that's
Karuta.
good.
I thought you were just gonna say it was like
I
fucking
was gonna
speakers on the castle or something.
Yeah, that's actually neat.
I was about
Um,
to say for inspiration, I would recommend reading the JPS Tanakh and uh listening to Henry Cow.
can you type those so I can know how to spell them?
Yeah.
Thank you. Yeah, I haven't. I didn't think of doing it as a diegetic thing. That's a good idea.
Thanks.
I mean, Henry Cow in part because um they're working within like a tradition that like J.A. Caesar was like drawing on very heavily for like actually writing the dual songs themselves.
Hmm.
Um so like if you listen to like for instance the song War, it has like elements that would consider like not too dissimilar from like how like an English version of like one of the dual songs would go. Like tell of the birth, tell how war appeared on earth, thunder and herbs, conjugated sacred verbs, musicians with bombs,
Yeah, I can see that
fertilized an egg with
immediately.
song. And then like, where it reaches sort of a conclusion is like, upon her spoon this motto, wonderfully designed, violence completes the partial mind. War does what she has to, people get what they deserve. Where like there's elements there that could be constructed to refer to something where there is an answer that you can guess.
Mm.
Or deduce, but it's also like kind of abstract and poetic in the same time. One of my favorite songs, by the way, I would say. I love Dagmar Krause's very strange voice.
Speaking of the Bible earlier, the title of this chapter is a reference to the prophecy in Numbers 24. I called it "A Star Shall
Nice.
Come Out of the Heavens," and that's because Utna's surname is Tenjo, which means the heavens, and you
Yeah.
have "A Star Shall Come Out of Jacob."
Yeah.
Which
Well, it's another point in my theory that Evangelion, Utena, and Madoka are all just about Judaism.
Yeah, I can see it.
and my own tendency of Madoka, Gurren Lagann, Uten, and Gnosticism. Actually, the star coming out of the heavens line, now that you put that in that, if you put that in its cultural context, you have to remember that, like, stars and the Watchers are kind of associated.
And don't forget, like the most obvious, like, "Oh morning star, how brightly thou shone, and
Right.
thou fell out of heaven." That bit.
Incidentally, I have
Yeah.
also been reading the Sun Lady Unveiled, which
Oh
is
yeah.
Yeah.
Oh,
Speaking of Gurren Lagann, I
and also don't forget. Oh, sorry. And also,
speaking of
go ahead.
yeah, sorry. Speaking
need
of
a
Gurren
stick.
Lagann, one of the other chapter titles I have like in the massive list of random like fragments of phrase I want to I'm thinking about using as chapter titles is like for a chapter where like Utna first sees like Akio's planetarium And the chapter title is
Ugh.
The Lights in the Sky Aren't Stars.
Oh wow.
Yeah, that is excellent.
Yeah,
That is a very
I mean,
mainline Utena show tone of phrase too. I could see that in the episode title.
that like that just like that title just calls to mind stuff like the owls are not what they seem.
Yeah.
Which like obviously like Ikuhara major David Lynch influence. But like it calls to mind like a variety of associations, but also like the star from heaven one, the stars from the heavens one, also ultimately just reminds me of the Holy Grail.
Yeah.
Like the story, von Eschenbach's story in particular of like the Grail being like kept by the neutral angels who refused to pick a side in the war in heaven, and then carried down like a stone from heaven to the earth.
Oh my god.
And this stone just being sort of like a relic around which creation is fashioned.
Yeah. Actually, I know what I'm gonna read now, but I do feel like the segues into somebody else's are probably better.
I don't think that's a straightforward segue, but let me get some water going. I'll hop
Sorry,
on.
sorry.
I'll be right back.
It's fine.
Yeah, I was debating if you want me to give you a little bit of breathing space. I can throw down my own, but that's also maybe not as clean a segue.
I kind of don't know how long mine is going to be. I guess like
Incidentally,
I
the
don't know.
original segue I was thinking was the way I tried to connect the dual songs to Karuta.
Okay, yeah, there we go. Talk a
Yeah.
little bit about that, and I'll warm up my singing voice.
Yay.
Oh my, I didn't realize you were going to be singing. Oh, this is
But what were you gonna
taking a
say?
whole new level. I just meant that, like, isn't that part of the whole... Because I read the Hyakunin Isshu, like, a couple years ago, and I'm assuming that that's kind of why you're getting into this style, because...
Yes, I've been studying.
Yeah. I actually we did... Caraparcel isn't here, but we did a live Andata reading IRL in London a couple years ago.
Uh-huh.
Nobody showed up, but part of the gimmick was that we each read a few poems from the Hyakunin Isshu
Holy
as
shit,
well as our own.
that's a blast.
And he had some like synth accompaniment and stuff too.
Oh yes.
Hi.
Well, nobody showed
Oh,
up,
you
but
are here.
everyone
Wait
who
a sec.
didn't.
Oh, hey, perfect timing. Yeah,
Okay.
remember that?
Well,
Gabe.
nobody
Poeta.
showed up, but all of the people who didn't show up went on to form their own publishing houses.
Gabe, do you have two pieces of wood to knock together? Do you have two things to knock together? In between every poem, I need a
Oh, okay,
of some
yeah,
kind.
I have. Oh, here's a really funny pair of things. I've got William T. Volman's The Lucky Star and The Book of the Law.
Okay, just do a quick
Hell yeah.
tap together. Perfect. Just go again between every poem.
Yeah.
Okay, I need to psych myself up. Are we ready?
Yeah.
Okay, cool. I have 20 of these done so far. I think I'm just gonna do 100 for the hell of it. I've been having a ton of fun with this. We'll see. Okay. Turkey vulture wheel till one ballerina wing splits the surface cross. Tehuacan Changala and won the Western Summit. Thank you. By the bank of doves, wings beat my hand, you pleaded. Me to lash green silk, round fragile heel announcing the taker of my breathing. 45 weeks down dappled station platform, I accompanied her quick climb like a duckling up Green Street's hanging garden. Arnold lilacs cropped, pound down to watercolor. Tell me, can the shade be candidate to equal pale Charles dawn and frozen? If before my death mounts my once lamentated reticence to burn, such end would meet palace songs, O God of siege and arrow. High on Beacon Hill and under sideways snowfall, I wish I saw that star. Burdening your raw-chilled hand, fall to be left misplaced there. When I first was held by proud warm courthouse sunlight, how distant felt then the antler velvet winter of lesser men than I. If you sentry peered inside those maidens perching in bright banner row, along the crenel concrete would silent seem their springtime. How can Christmas Day see your water coursing clear on driftwood and sand? Simple will you say our Lord was nobler when a child? If I chant the names, O highway of the 100, friends I cut from me, would one rejoin and echo, meet me where meet 3 churches? Sidemen steady swing, lay down a feather bed of golden lines in hay. I beg with these 10 talents my passage to the evening. Tulip stamen cold, when young my eyes were leaping, sure as Hernon's fawns, whose hooves clasp cliff for your weight, now moves my eyes as spear point. Little sparrow, my cupped hands can curl around you. How can my voice dare sing hoarse the tale of menfolk, yet say no heartbeat calls me? Paper herd of kites, pulled all by a branching string, some waver, some glide. So this flock of pelicans glides past the plumes of smokestacks. Tawdry is the gold of yellow winter willows where the black swan waits till she dives a thunderclap beneath the wilting water. Reach hospital bridge, for road and rail will not meet in tie tongue's low arms. Now clasp the turquoise lantern and walk pink weeds of sundown. Blanket form a field of violet soft like leather. Hurry, quench my thirst. Show me parting promise, make a collarbone arch aching. When last this name rose from lips that knew 10 of it, tangerine blossom. Skipped as if struck by cat's paw through tempered tall gate Dardan. Cut the killer's hive and bring me down the honey, sighs the shuffling birch. No more do your deft hands tear and melt the waxen heaven. Ever in this world has maple broad and narrow formed the 5-point star, the ancient claw of fire that folds heart chamber creases. Okay, and that's 20. Thank you.
Beautiful.
was
Thank
good.
you so much.
Yay! That was the best.
This is an established form, right?
Yes, yes.
Good work, Amara.
Yay!
Do you want to talk about the form at all?
I don't know. I've really just been reading a bunch of chai through.
Okay,
and
okay. That was where I
listening-
recognized it from. Then.
Yeah,
Like,
I
what-
was just
I-
listening to
I wasn't
recordings of the recitations and going crazy over them. I don't know. I am very much a creature of meter, and again, everything I write falls into some form or other, and it's been really fun just like getting into this groove for a while.
Yeah, I mean, like, the thing that sticks out to me is just, like, how very international, like, it is. Like, you're drawing from, like, so many different, like, mythological and poetic sources.
It's mostly just Boston. It's mostly just placed in Boston.
I mean, it's mostly just places in Boston. Like, I could
But
definitely
how you're
tell
placing those, that's the that's where it draws from the different sources. Like, what context it places that place in.
Yeah, I have been having a lot of fun. Though it is either Boston and just like personal stuff, or just like broader. I've really enjoyed like writing each of these from a very different perspective. Not much like shared between speakers. Again, that's entirely Hyakunin influence, but it's been fun to try and replicate.
Yeah.
Actually, is this tied into Heath at all? Because I recognize some like phrases.
Really,
from,
like what? I'm just
I
curious.
think that
but no.
there was something that actually I think it was the falling star line that I was reading in terms of the green.
Yeah, it is close. Beacon Hill as well.
Yeah.
I can.
Which also has like parallels with the comet in New Animals.
I can I can post these if people want to read them. I know I don't know. I think a lot of how I enjoy these is just the punctuation and just like what's
Yeah.
like a quotation where the commas are. That's a huge thing for me. Should I just where should I post it here?
Just in the lounge. Um,
Oh, is there
yeah,
a chat?
there's a chat.
Oh, okay. Oh, I didn't realize that. Okay, get out of here. Okay,
No,
give me 1 second.
the thing that Chihaya Furu as a gateway to the Hyakunin Issue and to that whole tradition, that it's part of why I thought of it in Charlie's context, because the thing that Chihaya Furu is a particularly good source, and why that comes down to us through that is that
Mm-hmm.
it has this vestige of a social form and a social context of poetry other than
Yes,
like the
exactly.
art world. And
Yeah, I really
that's
love that, especially like the casual or like sports scene of it is just like again so contemporary and living, but just like naturally the further you get into that world, like the more relationship you're gonna build with that kind of poetry, and just like you have to be obsessed with that too, or else there's just nothing there.
yeah.
Oh, it's so good. It's so
That's like watching I Claudius. There's like this sense that like people just quote poetry at each other in debates. Like
Mhm.
that's the level of social contextual familiarity.
Exactly. It's healthy. You gotta be preoccupied with this stuff.
Yeah. Actually, I was having this conversation with another friend about how, like, in my own work, I've had difficulty because when I can't make stuff up, I have to sort of, like, just do these really complicated social epistemics on what would happen, and how, yeah, to write, you kind of have to know all these little things across contexts, which is also what you're kind of doing with the traditions it integrates. That reminded me of when, in the Republic, Plato's whole polemic against the poets has to do with them sort of claiming to have all knowledge, because if you're
Mhm.
writing like the Iliad, you have to be talking about military strategy in one place and like boat building and how many people can fit on a boat and stuff in another place, and like the poets claim to be the sort of king of the sciences because they connect all these other things. But
I
Socrates is sort of like, but none of you actually know how to build a boat. You just like talk to
Yes,
people.
but we know good enough. We it's not about the technical knowledge. It's not about like the actual concrete skills. It's the ability to understand like where it is in the world and how to
Yeah,
approach it. You need to know
exactly.
what a boat means, and that is like distinct knowledge from like how to build one. And
Yeah,
again, like I don't know, the poet is an expert in all those different things in terms of how they interact with like archetype and across social situation, like that's what the whole thing is.
yeah,
Like okay, I don't actually know how to pick up the saw, but like I bet I could like suss out the hierarchy politics of construction of the boat construction site pretty easily.
right. Which also in the Jesus thing ties into another, like, I feel like we were talking about how, like, the main thing he's saying, just like, give everything away to the poor. Now, stop whining about it. And we all expressed vague approval of this, but we have not, like, all the way done it. And
it's
part of the
it's a
reason for
gamble.
that is that, yeah, it
It's
is a it's it's trading off with your own survival needs.
Yes,
And
especially in
that's
Tolstoy, it's really interesting because it's less about it being the morally right thing to do. It's less about your own action of helping others. It's
yes,
more just like this all in like message of belief in terms of like again, okay, I'm gonna do this crazy shit right now. I'm going to
exactly.
like completely ignore my own not only comfort, but like actual needs. Like I am just gonna literally cast everything off. I'm going to not just, it's not about charity or donation or gifts. It's more about self-deprivation. It's stripping yourself down to wilderness tier. And
Yeah.
okay, hypothetically, if everyone did that, if everyone put themselves in that position and weren't invested in holding on to that, like we would be fine. That would just be the kingdom of heaven. If everyone spontaneously did that, the kingdom of heaven would naturally arise if everyone gave their shit away. And obviously, everyone's not gonna do it at once, but I mean, you could start.
Yeah. And the whole, at that point, like, the definition of miracle as natural or supernatural becomes itself based on how you model the natural world, like, in your consequentialist model, and then also what could be outside that.
Mhm.
Yeah, I'm just like,
The leap of
I'm just
faith is
thinking about,
itself across that leap.
I'm just thinking about that dynamic, and like, you know, like the way like we were all, what you mentioned about like everyone like, just saying like approval of like the idea of like giving away all your money to the poor, and like, I come at it from like a bit of a different angle. Like with regards to like, like the inner transformation, like the stripping down thing, like that to me, like I could see how it could have some value, but in my personal value system, like that has like probably little value at all. Like I come at it from like the perspective of that one like early Last Psychiatrist blog post where he's like, like you go to a country in order to help out the people and like feed orphans. Like, are you doing it out of personal self-aggrandizement, or are you doing it out of like, a genuine desire to help? Like, nota bene, like the orphans get fed either way. They don't really particularly care about your internal psychodrama.
Yeah. No, and the paradox is that you need to do you need to do the former, the internal thing, in order to do the external overcoming of making it about your internal thing.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I'm just
Okay.
thinking.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, what were you about to say? Okay, about?
I was just going to see if anyone else wants to go.
I volunteer.
Okay, cool.
Yay!
Um. So if I may, um, I have a poem and a fragment, and if you like the poem and the fragment enough and wish to hear the paragraph, a paragraph, and if you wish to hear a little more, I can play a little stuff on mandolin.
Those all sound cool.
So I'll begin with the poem. Actually, I'm remarkably healthy. It's you that has the problem, being well adjusted to a fucked up world. Couldn't be me. I take in the filth of everything, and I vomit it right back out hard. It's like a cleansing. Try it sometime. But maybe you're just the filth that needs to be cleansed. You're sick. I am the apex of health. You are wasting away trying to feel it all. Only in blood is truth, and in truth is strength. So really it's good for you. It's for my own good. I am so sure of myself right now. Surer than I've ever been. And I like the feeling of finally, after all this time, getting to piss bullets into the faceless crowd that never stopped wanting me to drink their piss. And then a fragment, which is only 5 lines long, but I don't remember how I was going to continue it. It's not enough that he's dead. It's not enough that we killed him, sent him to eternal vacation. He must be humiliated completely with every insult. And I'm not sure if I was writing this about, like, Walter Benjamin, but I feel like I might have been writing it about him. Would anyone like to hear the paragraph now?
Sure.
Yes.
The paragraph is this. Everyone fantasizes that they'd be the one truly pro-social, anti-social lunatic. They'd be the serial killer that only kills bad guys like pedophiles and helps out innocent puppies. Everywhere you get, the world is a rotten place. There's too many sickos and pedophiles wandering the streets. You're 2 steps away from the world is a rotten place. Sickos deserve to be celebrated for dealing with it.
I think that last one is actually the kind of thing I was trying to, like, when I said I flipped my own position around and said, like, no, not having to have a vantage point for condemning the thing is faith. Like, the idea was that, like, if that is genuinely enough for you, like, it doesn't matter, then the problem is dissolved. If the problem is dissolved, the problem is dissolved. If the problem exists, it takes that form.
Mm-hmm.
Like the negative Gnosticism turning into celebrating the sickos.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, like, I wrote this in, like, a flurry of, like, psychological panic, I think. After reading a few too many, like, far-right forums and trying to track, like, the specific ways that they're evolving ideologically. But also noticing the exact same tendencies in everything from, like, I don't know, like a lot of, like, neo-Gnostic movements that, like, you know, posit, like, you know, the world itself is, like, sort of an unjust hierarchy that needs to be toppled, like, ending up in, like, you know, these sort of, like, super reactionary social formations where it's like, well, the world is like an unjust hierarchy that needs to be toppled, so, like, you know, what really is good is, like, you know, being the best at, like, maneuvering inside of it,
like how
and
Sneeko
using its methods.
reinterpreted the Matrix.
Yeah, or how, like, you know, like, the whole dimension of, like, esoteric Hitlerism, for instance. It has, like, you know, Savitri Devi has, like, the idea of the lightning and the sun, like, the sun being, like, the transcendent principle, and, like, the lightning being, like, the horizontal, like, brutal principle. And she says, well, what's really necessary is the conjunction of lightning and sun into one, like in Hitler.
That's ripping off Tomberg. She's literally ripping off Valentin Tomberg there.
Yeah. And, like, yeah, and I mean, like, you know, there's the thing. You get that, and you get, like, people, you get, like, you get situations in which, like, it manifests in, like, more socially acceptable ways, where, like, you know, you just end up with, like, people celebrating, you just end up, like, with things like, my roommate Gail has been pointing out a bunch, like, on Twitter, like, for instance, my friend Gail has been pointing out on Twitter a bunch, for instance, where, like, you know,
oh yeah, I've seen
like,
those.
there's all these
Posts.
fucking videos of, like genuine, like, fucking sociopaths just, like, doing, like, these quote-unquote child predator hunter videos where, like, it's very obviously just, like, you know, these people just want somebody to,
Yeah,
like,
that stuff
torture.
is fucking ugly to
They
watch.
just,
It's bizarre.
yeah, they just want somebody to torture, and they found like an outlet where like if you say this seems bad, you shouldn't do this to somebody, like you get like 1,000 people going, oh, so you think pedophiles are cool or some shit like that. And then like you go into the darker corners and you find like these like weird webs where like you find these weird fucking webs where like these puritanical strains of like um esoteric neo-fascism are like sharing the same like informational structure and memeplexes and whatnot as like these much less puritanical and much more like, you know, like violent and like predatory and explicitly like, you know, transgression loving strains of esoteric fascism.
Right. That's kind of the thing you were talking about with the evangelicals and, like, taking on the weird ancient Semitic polytheism. Like, that whole cross-pollination between the really esoteric Gnostic strains and the ultra-Orthodox strains.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I mean, like, there's like, I think, like, an essential thing there where, like, if your premise, like, once again, like, you know, I'm coming at this from the perspective of, like, to quote, like, the guys from Henry Cow again, the world is a problem. I'm coming
Yeah.
at this pretty explicitly from the perspective of, like, you know, the world is not good. It's not a good place to be. It's not necessarily evil. Because I don't like personally view the world as something that has intention, and I don't view like any sort of creating forces within it as having like intention to produce what they did. But I also come at it from the perspective of like if you're attributing to this not like a recognition of like kind of like the fucked upness of world affairs and the fucked upness of sentience and the fucked upness of consciousness in a world filled with suffering, but rather trying to distill these into like a metaphysical essence of malevolence that permeates the world, you're going to see like, you know, any form of you're going to see like, you know, that metaphysical essence reflected out on you wherever you look. And it's not a short walk. It's really not a short walk from like pointing out like evidence of this metaphysical nastiness to just celebrating acts of metaphysical nastiness for at least like, you know, extirpating the other kinds of metaphysical nastiness.
War is a purification rate.
That's the other thing where one of the big, like, miracle narratives is about casting out demons, which could effectively be, like, sort of offensive psychology, basically.
Mm-hmm.
Like, actually,
What do you mean by that?
in the sense of, like, people get into these, like, flip a metaphysical binary in the wrong direction, and that sort of becomes another entity, and getting rid of that entity is really difficult.
Yeah, that actually takes me to something very interesting, which is I'm not entirely sure how like familiar you are with like deliverance ministry.
No, what is that?
Where okay, so like where like, you know, the high church is famous for like performing exorcisms which involve like, you know, like all like the holy water and the crucifix and like the sovereign and the solemn rites and whatnot, and are often dealing with like, and like stereotypically at least are dealing with like demons named in like the Ars Goetia or something along those lines, or any of like the demonological manuals of like the Middle Ages or something. Deliverance ministry is like the evangelical Protestant equivalent of this. It involves a lot less
Is this the
ritual.
snake guys?
Well, it's not just them.
Okay.
It's bigger than the snake guys. But it involves like a lot less ritual and a lot more like spontaneous like prayer. It involves a lot of like it involves a lot of shouting like, I'm commanding the demon to leave in the name of Jesus. The holy name of Jesus will tell you to get lost and stuff like that. And the thing is, and the fundamental thing about this is that like a lot of the times
Yes.
the demons in deliverance ministry are just named things like sexual abuse or alcoholism or depression or like not getting out of bed in the morning. They just have those names. And they're treated, and like you could, and it's very weird because like on the one hand, like like it seems to be borrowing this understanding of like demons and what they are from like sort of like a psychological interpretation of like demonology, but it's also fundamentally about like treating these demons as like very, very real in a literal sense entities. That can be like actually removed from the body by like praying hard enough.
What does that remind me of? Just the way you said, oh, like removed from the body, really reminded me of some tradition or other, but I'm not sure what. Oh yeah, I know. Thetans, that's what it was.
Yeah.
I wasn't being sarcastic. It actually did take me that long to. I wasn't like, oh well, guess what? I actually did forget the term.
Yeah, I mean, like,
Yeah, body thetans. What the fuck?
I will like again, like from like my evangelical background, like I find it very fascinating that like a lot of people try to like talk about like like cessationism, for instance. Like cessationism is like the mainstream position of a lot of the churches, where like the gifts of the Spirit are only like used for like special occasions or whatnot. And like they dried up after a certain period of time, or like the stuff about like trying to understand miracles from outside of like a literalist supernaturalist framework, because like if I were still like an evangelical, I would be entering into this conversation and just going like, yeah, of course miracles are real, what are you talking about? I performed them and I've seen them myself. You don't have to do any of this intellectualization shit.
Yeah, and what I'm trying to do with that is decouple the idea of literalization from any of the particular Pascal's muggings it's attached to by faith traditions.
The past what?
Any of the Pascal's muggings that are like coupled to it. The whole
By the way,
therefore your entire ability to like epistemically form models of these entities is predicated on your accepting a bunch of things you can't even understand without such a model.
By the way, would you guys like to hear a little bit of violin?
Absolutely.
Yes, please.
Or mandolin,
Actually,
I meant to say.
Oh, I could do violin after.
Oh my fucking god, Angie. best. Just the fucking
That
best,
was
Angie.
awesome.
Nice.
I love how you had that on deck too.
Yes.
Oh, I was just improvising. If I had like a good fucking tune to play, I would have played that. But I've been trying to practice King of the Fairies for the past couple of weeks, and I still just do not have it down very well. I mean, like I might as well demonstrate just to show you how like not that great I am at it. But like that, you see, you
I
see.
love it though. I love it though.
That was a
Okay,
good tune, though. That is how a good
one
tune
more shot.
happens. Come on, yeah. I'm getting my fiddle because
Ah,
Angie's playing the
you see,
mandolin.
I always flub on that particular note, even if I'm doing well. But yeah, that reminds me, I should check once again how my very unorthodoxly constructed ode is coming in the mail. Yeah, I got that mandolin. I have two mandolins. One is unusable. One is just like broken to the point of unrepairability. It's 100 years old. It was made by like a manufacturer in the U.S. and it was owned by like a Jewish musician who also owned a violin that I own. My grandmother got it from an estate auction for me. And the other, the one that I was just playing, was imported from Ukraine a couple of months ago. And it was built in the USSR before its collapse, well before its collapse. And I had the same like experts, I had the same like luthiers look at it that I had to look at the other mandolin, and they were like, yeah, this is also probably unrepairable, but like I also just decided, you know, this looks a bit less unrepairable than the other ones, so I might as well just like, you know, just like put some strings on it and fuck around. And right now I have it like tuned to like a very unorthodox tuning. The mandolin is typically tuned in all fifths. I have it tuned in all fourths. Just because like that loosens the strings a bit and makes it a little easier to like press down on them. Even though I like selected relatively low string gauges so that they wouldn't like be too tense to like play comfortably.
Want to try King of the Fairies, like, following along with me?
I'll try.
See, that's not even
Jesus
really
fucking
part of...
Christ, you guys. Ugh.
It's not
That's
even
so
really part of
good.
my regular set either. So I'm just kind of reconstructing that from memories of sessions.
This is the best fucking ever. Oh, I'm so happy with that.
And I wasn't like doing chordal company because I couldn't figure out how to do chordal company. So I was just like trying to do like a sort of counterpoint.
Actually, the
But
sort
yeah,
of
I'm very fond of that tune.
medievalism of this moment gives me a good segue into the thing I wanted to read, which, like,
Beautiful.
I may have to. I don't necessarily want to cut because it is potentially good advertising, but I might. It'd have to be sneaky advertising because I might want to write this story under a pseudonym, so I'll cut it if I ever do that. But for the moment, like, this is. I've been working on this. I did this Arthurian story in 3 days, and I got 3/5 of the way through, and I keep wanting to return to it and never being able to quite justify it, but the one time I did, I wrote this passage that, like, I'm quite proud of how it stands just as a passage. Laszlo slept on the side of the hill again, pretending he was in an ordinary place. 2 imps crouched at Gwenhwyvar's bedside, and he didn't want to make things more complicated for her by beating them. When he woke up, he wasn't sure what to be more surprised by. The little pink and green-haired girl cuddled up in the crook of his chest, or the sea surrounding the hillside, the ship bobbing placidly around it, sending white barbs scattering across each grey crest that broke on its side like birds. "See, I told them," Kale yawned, rubbing their floppy ears against their horns with the balls of their hands. "Arthu's voyaged to Anun before. You didn't need to come here and confuse my lady." The slope they were lying on was one of the 4 tors he had seen when he crossed the drawbridge, so they had to be outside the outer ring again. Laszlo had never seen the sea before, but somehow he wasn't sure this was supposed to be it. Sharp and metallic as endless shields, white and black and grey sliding through each other, exactly mirrored by the sky. "It was I," the massive voice of King Bogdamag spoke in both of their minds, though they had no idea where the Quinator was, "who guided their ship here. Emry's sigil was strong." Was that the strange pinwheel painted on its sails, like a charm the women would etch on the doors of Astal to keep them strong before a storm? "But would not have found us in the glass sea were it not my will. Go and invite them in." At the bottom of the slope, where the drawbridge had been before, was now a spiral jetty, leading to a stone gate with a bull's head knocker. Pridwen had thrown down an anchor between the stones of the jetty, not in the sea itself. Laszlo had never seen a ship like this either. It still sported the coiling dragon figureheads of the Saxon lordship Arthu had claimed as spoils when he pushed Ael to the sea at Baden, painted red and white for the dragons of Cymru and Cornwall that had battled in the sky at his birth, but had been modified with the sharp nose and flat deck of a Roman galley. From either side of the red Pendragon, he and Emrys scanned the unfamiliar barbarians accompanying their Tanist, who had stretched out before they strode down the hill back into their recognizable male form, the blood-stained white slip they had been wearing stretching and fraying across their barrel chests, and the bloomers that had ballooned around their hips now display. This vulgar appearance didn't seem to give the men on board as much pause as Laszlo's presence. Walkmai, leaning on his shield on the edge of the boat, started at the sight of Laszlo and waved heartily. "I was telling them all about you on the way. You actually made it ahead of us." "This motherfucker made me look like a loser," Kale fumed into the filthy gauze scarf they wrapped around their face as they strode down the hill. "I had like 20 curses on me. I couldn't do shit, and he comes out of nowhere and kills one imp, and everyone changes all their plans, because you know how Panthers get when a human impresses them." Most of the warriors on board the ship weren't even looking in their direction, although Emrys stared immediately and directly into Laszlo's eyes to the point that he had to avert them, not just in one direction, but ricocheting around the sky and landscape as if he was being chased by something. "How did you get here?" Laszlo blinked back. "I came here by land." "The more treacherous path," Emrys added, climbing down the anchor rope lithely for his age. "This is not a real sea, no more than the path you took was real land. This is the glass sea, the sea of potentia. Do you know Greek? It is marginally more precise." Gulping, Lauzelo nodded, remembering Elena's lessons, the dullness of her warmth next to Gwenwifar's cutting brilliance. Pure dunamis, in the weak sense. The druid swayed gently in the wind as he walked. There was no smell of salt here, no birds, but there was wind, sweeping from end to end of the sky, as vast and featureless as the mirrored sea itself. Impossible to reach any one coordinate without knowing it exactly, but inevitable to get there if you do. Thankfully, I still know King Bogdamag's sigil. Whereas you found a perilous path through actuality, and now have earned the right to open this gate, which I would otherwise have had to invoke the powers of my own blood to open. All this talk of blood seemed strange for immortal beings that lived on a featureless mirrored sea. Blood mattered to Lauzelo, to the Huns, to their victims, because he and they had a body that would stop working if he lost too much of it. He also didn't understand why they weren't just let in directly. Lauzelo blinked and lifted the knocker to find a small keyhole underneath. He found the key in his cantele. The dawn light of the garden in the outer circuit rolled over them like a flood of petals. King Bogdamag had taken a mostly human form, although he seemed less comfortable in it than his son. His face looked somehow like the wider side of a human face mirrored directly across the middle axis. It was chalk white, with a blue vein in the form of a Greek gamma bulging out of the middle of his forehead, and retreating only where his copper hair flowed away from a crown of sea-green scales. His robes resembled a Christian priest's, except with the stole also made of the skin of some kind of reptile or sea creature. He and Melwas, the latter now wearing an all-black version of Roman armor and a disdainful sneer from under a half-bull mask, flanked Gwenwifar, who strode unbound and seemingly unbothered onto the jetty on bare feet. Arthu threw himself at her, lifted her pressed to his chest, bent backwards. She didn't even react for the first second or two, then a laugh bubbled on her lips and her slender fingers slipped into his hair and Lauzelo's heart bobbed in his throat like a rotting apple, realizing how little she had really shared with him. "Come, let's to the garden." As they ambled between banks of tulips, pools of irises, curtains of lilac, more and more figures stumbled off the side trails into their train. Naked humans, men with tonsures of heads that would wear a mitre or crown, woven with flowers instead. Stomachs distended, hands clasped in prayer or chained from the one to the next like children in a May Queen's train. "It was your queen's idea to include all of our thralls in the gamble." "And mine own, too." Gwenwifar pointed out a couple of men Lauzelo didn't recognize, but at whom Arthu stared. Kea was back in their child form, perched on one's shoulders and nodding their hair. At one point, Owain of Reged from the tournament stepped out from behind a trellis of ivy and grapes. For some reason, a lion was lolloping at his side. "Oh," he looked more embarrassed than anything. "My liege, I was afraid we'd be separated forever if you're real. So many things have happened that I can't say for sure. How many days has it been for you?" "Only 3. We withdrew from the tournament, but it's just wrapping up. We launched the Pridwen into the Sea of Glass instead of the Strait of Brittany and arrived here in a night. I think because this champion had already won the Queen's freedom, they let us find them easy." Arthur's rough hand scraped Lauzelo's forearm for the first time. "Ah, Ugorian. Your worthiness commended you in the tournament in the drink hall," Owain greeted him. "I wish I could have talked more with you." "You'll get plenty of chances on the way back," Gwalchmai laughed. "What is this gamble?" Arthu's suspicious attention returned to their host. "This fine young man, Lauzelo of Agoria, defeated one of my son's battle imps, and not a weak one. In a year's time, my son wishes to have a rematch, pitting his core instance in single combat, something I never thought I would see the layabout do, even with a Panthère prince his age, let alone a human. Since this time we have hosted the combat, and your queen is the prize. The next match, if you will, should be held at your own stronghold at Camulodunum. We will come to you. If Lauzelo wins, your queen will not need so much as displace herself from her chambers." "And if he loses?" "She will return to us and marry my son Melwas, replenishing the Marduk line with the fine intelligence and judgment of Gaur." Arthur swept his tartan cloak over his wife's shoulders as he leaned close to speak, but not so close that he could be heard. Gwenwyfar, did you consent to this? It wasn't my absolute preference, but my yes. Don't start talking like them again. Why this man? I have killed a panthère's trunk before. I would not flee from one again. An imp is not the same. This man is stronger than you. She did not hesitate even for a moment to deliver the cold judgment to her husband, nor did he flinch at it. Nor is Melwas the same as Ispadavin. Ha! So that's what happened to that provincial buffoon. But no need to talk of the likes of Ispadavin in esteemed company. Tell me, daughter of Ografan, did you ever meet your great-uncle Idris the Stargazer? Someone tapped Lauzelo on the shoulder. He glanced away from the royal disputation to find himself blinking into the eyes of the panthère woman he had rescued, who didn't blink at all. Her eyes somehow looked like marble, like they weren't wet or vulnerable enough to see, but they were wide and lined up instantly and unreleasingly with his. His own eyes flitted back and forth between them and the face over her shoulder, sitting on a bronze platter beaten with curling reliefs, balanced atop the shoulders he had cut it from. The head smiled woozily, eyes tilted up to the sky, while the body waved at him. The hand that wasn't waving was connected to the panthère lady by a leash, a stretchy rope of a purple material he didn't recognize ending in a smooth metal cuff on his end, a flexible harness hooked around the middle finger on hers. They were wearing different clothes than he had first seen them in. The male's warlike body strained against a starched white shirt pressed ever tighter by a small black vest, the shape of his muscular thighs and tapering calves concealed by straight black pants, both made of materials finer than any Lauzelo had ever seen in the human world, but inexplicably featureless. The woman wore a smooth, almost shapeless dress that left her shoulders, arms, and legs below the knees bare, her feet precariously balanced in sandals smaller and looser than any Mediterranean ones, impossibly thin and regular strips of shining white leather, printed with green and orange flowers that converged out of clouds of colored points. She had been boring into his eyes for a full 5 seconds before she matched her partner's mechanical arm movement with a manic flutter. Hi! Hi, Lauzelo! Amazing! You did well when we met, but I hardly imagined you would be the man of the hour quite like this. Lauzelo's finger floated up toward the man he had killed. Why? How is he here? It's okay, he's in my thrall now. Lauzelo realized he had absolutely no idea what language they were speaking. It was a language he only heard in dreams. We've been having a great time since you helped us settle things. We really can't thank you enough. Lauzelo thought of Gwenwyfar and the cart he had ridden in, the blood and nicks and stains he hadn't had time to ask about between her sweaty veil of hair and the sheets. Did you trick me? No. Her voice was like flint sharpened on a cave wall. If I had ended in his thrall, I would be much, much worse off than he is now. Heh. If the old ball and chain ain't telling the truth. The panthère's dopey, drugged voice, like all the corners, had been rounded off as consonants, and stiff-ironed grin seemed at odds with what he was implying. Really, we're both thankful to you. We'll talk more at the feast, but if we could treat you to some small token of our thanks directly... The Queen, Lauzelo stammered. Who knows how much time she's going to spend at negotiations. She probably won't have more than a few minutes to spare for you. And it's not like she's your queen, is it? Well, not in the sense they had consummated last night, but he had consummated that sense last night, and now felt himself withering even under Arthur's over-the-shoulder appraisals. He had learned about Gwenwyfar from Gwalchmai's speech, and confirmed everything he had hoped in person. But who was Arthur? Just, as his jealousy wanted to believe, some Philistine warlord Gwenwyfar used as a pretext to exercise power she wouldn't otherwise be allowed to as a woman? But then why would she object to using Melwa's power? And her body language with Arthur was like Elena's with him. And they passed between rows of rose hedges. As they passed between rows of rose hedges, misted lightly by a massive 3-tiered pink marble fountain between the silhouette of Bogdamag's statuette leading them, Gwenwifar walked by Arzu's side, 2, now 3 rows ahead of Lauzelo, leaning into Arzu's shoulder. "Oh, I forgot. You've probably never even seen one of these." The female panthère reached into her bag and pulled out something round on a stick, covered in a kind of hard, crinkly gossamer. It was round and flat and glittered dully like a shell, in coiled white and red stripes. Some strange kind of sand dollar? Did the skewer sink into something inside the shell that he was supposed to suck out like an oyster? He hadn't even seen those before the feast at the tournament. He would probably look like a fool if he didn't know what it was, although he still couldn't say for sure if Gwenwifar had been more pleased or displeased with his choosing to look like a fool. He reached out, sliding his fingers awkwardly around it before she had even offered it. The panthère looked surprised, then burst out laughing, then leaned forward until he could almost feel her breath on his forehead. "Take it. See, I told you, honey, they love these every time. Can you get the camera? But you have to unwrap it, like this." Her long fingers danced, over his, barely brushing, and down around the base of the circle where the covering was bunched, untwisting it until it floated off like a leaf. He leaned down and picked it up, put it in the sack at the front of his tunic before looking back at the opalescent marvel. "It's a lollipop. You—" She leaned her lips almost down to its rim and stuck out a sharp, pointed tongue like rich salmon. "Lick it. Suckle it. It's sweet, but I shan't demonstrate or I'll ruin it for you. Try it." She held it out with a generous length of stick for him to wrap his own fingers around and place the upper rim between his lips. The male panthère had hidden half his face behind a small rectangular cartouche of bronze-colored metal in which a tiny eye of glass seemed to replace his own with a cyclopean one. The other squeezed shut as he crouched into position. The metal eye flashed as Lauzelo coiled back in shock at the sweetness in his mouth. Something sickly, too much at once, as if 4 different juices had half-dried and left just their stickiness, flushing his saliva like a tide, like the sun setting waves on fire. The panthère woman laughed and cheered, and a shadow somewhere in Lauzelo's heart crossed over the new sunlight as they crowded around the rectangle as if it were a mirror, tittering and whispering to each other in a barbarous tongue. They turned it around and there was an icon of him, the size of an illustration in a book of hours and as perfect as the ones Elena told him they had in Byzantium. His shoulder rolled back, his hair bouncing against the rose tapestry behind him, his eyes widening. He blushed and covered his face, feeling somehow as ashamed as Adam in the garden, and ran on ahead. He ran to catch up to Gwalchmai, who was lingering around a donkey-drawn flat cart that took up the rear of the retinue, hand on his sword pommel. 6 large sacks, from which the smell of meat rose, were capped by a small round wooden table like a giant's shield, covered in white lacework patterns painted on the wood, 5-fold loops recalling both Gwalchmai's pentagram and Gwenwifar's mayflowers. "A miniature of the one we have at home," a beaming Gwalchmai informed him. "The panthères can keep their rose gardens. Our round table is nothing so much as the rose of heaven." "Is this all gifts?" The panthères seemed unspeakably rich, and he hadn't seen the round table contribute this much even at the tournament. He knew the laws of Xania, but also the laws of tribute. Was this some further elaboration of courtesy, or fear? "No, this is for us. It would be discourteous with any other host, but they know we know about their food. They won't begrudge us. We can break bread with them, but never the same bread, at least not on their own territory." Wait, what about their food? He remembered something Elena had told him about Hades. But those were pagan gods. They weren't real, not even the way panthères. Even the panthères he had always assumed were just a story the Huns told themselves to get their bloodlust pumping and feel better about sacking villages and taking slaves. "We're going to the west to slay panthères, the fallen sons of heaven who enslave the settled peoples." "You went west to slay pregnant women and old blind men in their huts." "How do you think they keep all these thralls? Oh no, don't tell me you haven't already." Gwalchmai looked over the red sugar stains on Lauzelo's lips, the lollipop still dangling limply from his hand. The laughter of the couple sparked up from behind him like birdsong. "Lauzelo! Say, won't you come back home with us after? There's so many more things for you to try."
Did you cut out?
Yeah, no, that's it. That's the section.
I am like commanding you to finish this.
Whoa.
You actually have to.
Yeah.
Okay, okay. Yeah. I'm planning to at like Mayday or by Mayday. Oh,
Intoxicating. Yeah, again, I think just the tone you read it in goes a long way to like I don't know. I've been thinking a lot about the institution of the fairy story, you know what I mean?
yeah,
Just like that kind of like odd bent just like deep mythic alternate logic where just like it's less about magic as we think of magic and more like stumbling into ingrained rules of etiquette and physics that like you haven't known about but fucking should have. You know what I mean?
yeah.
I think that sense that deeply strange other face of the coin.
Chess court.
The way yes, the way you read it very much put me in that mindset, but like while like it very being in the while being very in the moment, like not mundane, but conversational. You know what I mean? It really does
Yeah,
feel like the on the ground perception of someone in that situation, but like also from that time. And I don't know, I feel like that's hard to nail without getting like all hokey modern
right. It's
or
the
just like
problem all the Marvel
grandstanding
slop is trying to
mythic.
solve.
Yeah.
Like they're failing really badly at it, but that's the reason that stuff is written like that here.
Uh-huh.
And
Yeah,
like it's
and
down.
again,
Yeah.
the way you read it really
Thanks.
gets me on board with it.
Thanks. I'm really glad to hear that. I'm really proud of just like the way I've conceptualized um, doing simultaneous. This ties back into the thing we were talking about earlier, but like simultaneously taking the most supernaturalist, like all the shit in the romances is literally true position, and also the one that's like historically and sociologically and psychologically informed. Like this is an Arthur in the 5th century. I'm using these like alternate language names of all of them, which is blatantly something I'm just ripping off Maya Dean. But like,
It fucking works. I don't know. I really, again, that
Oh,
is one of those little touches where just like, oh, if you go with a slightly more accurate or even just like cool sounding version of an often repeated name, like you are giving it a lot of your own texture, but even more in that, like demanding people take it seriously as a word
yeah,
again.
yeah.
Um, I don't know. I feel like repeat any proper noun enough and it'll get stuck in your head.
yeah.
And like again, switch it up a little bit and you'll be able to build up
Names are
that
a
memory again
language.
for yourself.
Yeah, I'm curious. What was the part that you mentioned to me on Twitter where I tweeted out like some like a random thought about like AI solving the problem of envy or something, and you said that it helped you with this novel?
Oh yeah, the thing I was trying to figure out where to go next after this passage was these
Mm-hmm.
Panter. I'm also kind of ripping this off Grant Morrison, but Grant Morrison didn't do it at quite this interval. Um, the two Panthers who are sort of collated from a few characters who appear in like the incidental encounters of the Knight of the Cart that in the romance just seem to come out of nowhere and vanish. Um, they're played like a 1950s couple. They're like a suburban Lynchian kind of time traveler almost. And so when they capture Lauselo, who is Lancelot, and take him back to their castle, that's just like this cookie cutter house out of like the suburbs in the 1960s. and they just keep him as a pet to sort of listen to them have these completely petty nonsense slice of life problems. And I was trying to figure out how to write that, what they would talk about, because ironically I've run as far away from that sort of lifestyle myself as possible, even though I'm
Yeah.
like, so then, or to having to internalize its logic. And then I was like, oh, they're just going to compare their stuff with their neighbors constantly. And all this stuff is like completely hallucinated out of thin air in the world logic of these people who basically have access to the the universal agent all the time. But they just create stuff out of thin air to compare with each other.
Makes sense. Makes sense.
I can run next if anyone else.
Sure.
Unless it was
Yes, please.
I need to go to bed. Sorry.
All
Good
right.
night,
Thanks.
everybody.
Night.
Okay,
Wait.
Charlie.
I'll stand for
Charlie.
one more.
Thanks.
But see ya.
Wait.
Yeah, we don't
Wait,
need to keep these
Ceci, I
going
want
as
you to-
long as we always do, unless everybody. Yeah.
Ceci, sorry. Amara, I do want to talk to you a little after all the readings.
Sure. Well, we'll see. I'm getting to that. But no, I'll stay up.
Okay.
All right. Okay, so I'll just read like halfway through a short story I'm working on, a short work, Amorous Seltzer. So I'll just be doing that for today. Yeah, I'm just looking right now just to see how it runs, like stylistically, particularly from people who from like who I haven't really asked about with edits before. I guess I just want to challenge myself, I suppose, just like to like a somewhat new audience, I suppose. Although for some of you, you've probably heard this already. Can you hear me over the synthesizer?
I'm still
Yes.
not hearing this. Yeah, I'm not really hearing the synthesizer even, but.
Hold on.
Oh, wait. No, wait. I'm just not in. Yeah, I can hear it.
All right, give me a second. So my voice is. So you can still hear my voiceover.
Oh my god,
correct?
what is Beyond Citadel? I keep. Yeah.
All right. Let me know when to start then.
Yeah.
You can start now.
All right, cool. Rizuoko walked on the shore, sand caked on her feet through her sandals. Dung roots glow into her dyed blonde hair, fraying the beams of sunlight. Trim bangs flowing behind her, meandering around the crags of her shoulder blades. Strapped tank top tied into little bows. Within the viewfinder, luminescence bathed this stretched little globe. A bubble that scooped the beach where she stands alone, yet the hushes of the ocean whispered through her through the rushes of air that sap the sky of its white heat. Same one that came in slivers through the curtain morning when I woke up beside her, still asleep. Last night we lay there the way two passengers on a train sat together, and in the dark we may have teetered toward each other by accident, but these brushes would not recoil back to the distant waves of passers-by. Movements that did not crease the sheets but lingered with the knobs of her knuckles resting on my back, underneath the clouds of the duvet, sailing above little islands formed by her touch. K-cars chatter above the embankment until their noise dissolves in the breezes, and I hesitate on pressing the smooth metal droplet of the camera's shutter button, as if once my finger presses it, something small would break, and would confirm that I was soon to join the same surfaces of that world she inhabited, and soon jar her from it. Although it would happen anyway, as she turned to me, eyes narrowed into slight concern. "Kay, I thought you wanted to take a picture." "Oh, nah. I thought better of it," I said, lowering the Instax camera. "Cheap ass," she sighed, but chuckles into a little smile, shaking her head because I seem to do this all the time, and she takes off her sandals to dip her feet in the water. Photography would have been an extra charge. Given that we've seen each other through the escort agency several times, she would do other things during our time together, sometimes turning to throw the middle finger up when I nod her way, or glares a little when I talk too long. Each one threatens to ambush me, like walking in the middle of the road to get hit by a car. A kind of statistical objective fact about the violent acts in the world. Couples milled or reeled around us, some taking photos of the shore, or mounting their phones on the end of collapsible selfie sticks, where they lean on each other. Glints of the sun on the ocean planed into bright tiles of the phone screens that dim into a picture of the couples that little moment conferred to them. Rizooka and I live like these pictures, the kind that cut between the rushes at work, promised by the warmth of an afternoon sun that there were paradises if we followed its long, meandering rays. Maybe we have that in common with the couples here, who would soon return in the glowing windows of hotels or waiting at the station platform, the daylight from the afternoon that once shone on them lowered, kindled in the fluorescent light within trains and convenience stores, before it solidified into the gray slate of walls of in their apartment's empty space. The mattress buoyed up their limbs as fatigue dims out the ceiling lamps, eyes closing to smother out even the slightest glow, falling and waking up when it's all over. Save up some money or something. Maybe you can afford to get out of here sometime, I said, saying it with the inevitability of our partings. Only one day it'll happen for real, but it'll happen in a way that we think about it later, and it makes sense. She'd have all her luggages set out behind her at Haneda Airport, or maybe she won't say anything at all, because that's how all these things happen. That is until I call asking if she's free. No one leaves here, she said, but then adds, sometimes, to account that even such convictions can get undone anyway, until she walks off, humming a Joni Mitchell song about parking lots. When we drove through the town, gaps of fields rustled between the sliding and glass doors of convenience stores, a slight pull of the petals from bouquets outside of flower shops, brushing the shirts hanging on the racks off the clothing shops, balconies stippled above the low-rise buildings with their fills of the sky. Nature almost being this random span that would just show how far away things were. Maybe all that longing bloomed these leaves through all that distance, branches twisted with dead nerves that wanted to live somehow. Now things that we just kind of look at, the way Rizooka nods to other couples that we pass by while we walk together on the beach. All these small gestures, the kind things that we hope would remind us that things were at least half decent. We got in the Honda Beat, a little K Roadster whose side carved into a vent along the curved door jamb. A sleek front cowl swollen at the sides rimmed above the thin headlights, hugging the broad bumper with two slits of intake ducts. Ignitions within the three-cylinder engine revved up behind us, and we fly through the curves of the road along the serrations of the coastline, floating on the ocean, cliffs around us, these waves within the eddies of the water. Rizooka brought her knees to her chest, resting her slender arm on them, moving her arm slowly as if to catch a rope from the stream of air frayed off the windshield. Living dangerous with your knees up on the seat, huh? I didn't know the Department of Traffic Safety drove over the speed limit, she glared. Nah, yeah, I'm corrupt and all that, I said, leaning my head back on the seat, looking up to the sky, feeling the chill of that blue stratosphere while I shifted up to fifth gear. Cruising, the engine settles into a lower RPM, opening a lull from the whips of the throttle where rocks once convulsed around us, now smoothing into green patinas from trees on the straightaways. Winds cupped their hands around the K Roadster. Rizooka pecked at my cheek, a drop of affection falling into a pool and the eddies into halos, some holy things, like a truth, like someone's watching us. You know I like being around you, she said, her voice all husky. Wish you would, I responded, curt, only glancing at her at the rearview mirror. I do, you know I do, she pouted. All right, I only said, a kind of thing that I can only accept, quietly. If I said nothing, it'd hold me to that a bit longer, and I didn't need to say something that that. Rizooka said nothing too, things unsaid, all too typical. My mom called a while back to tell me that one day a tsunami will submerge Japan, and all I'd think of was that if it did happen somehow, I just thought it'd better kill me and that if I survived, then it was no apocalypse whose rapture I could partake in. It'd just be another thing that happens. If anything, these acts of nature were somehow the last thing that could understand that even in everything, nothing lasts forever. Rocks creased into the gravestones of the ocean surf between the bows. Do you miss home? Rizooka asked. Hmm? You don't have to tell me if you don't want to. Do I miss it? Sure. But like, anyone would miss a good time like that mostly because it's gone. It's mostly gone things. Do we mourn? No. We just walk on. It's the least we can do. Right, I suppose that is the most obvious thing. But the only thing that's different is that you're driving. Car sex might be hot. Wow, stop, she said, slapping my shoulder. My company doesn't even allow me to do things like that. Well, we know work is keeping us civil. You're a teacher, you know, Kay. Right. Approaching town, we stopped off at a soba and udon place in a traditional house with a tiled roof, a tall blue flag waving outside next to a bench, accompanied by a glass case with frosted miniature udon bowls. Sliding the door open, she puts on her bunched-up vest over her bare shoulder as she asks the elderly woman at table for two. When we sit down, we talk a little about how our jobs are going, not divulging too much, but sometimes it seems her feline eyes are keen enough to pick any kind of thing about me from the slightest aversion, yet she doesn't say anything, merely changing the subject. Maybe there was another part of me that she sees, but I won't know it, endlessly adhering into the movements of that other. As I saw her, parting her hair from her ear, the way she would lean close, kicking my feet sometimes, there would just be a kind of cajoling love to it. That Rizooka, the one she put forth, and in those parts of us, we would believe them, not needing to delve so much and find out why, only that we're here, and we do our best out here. At another table, a man and a woman in sports clothes argue in Cantonese, unable to contain their irritation as a woman chastises the man for his phone being out of battery. Rizooka's eyes veer toward that commotion, but not acknowledging it, as if just touching upon it before looking at the menu. Usually she would help English-speaking tourists, but she merely kept out of the way of the woman's barrage of critiques assailing the man, who would only give dulcet excuse about how his USB-C cable wasn't working. I raise my hand up a bit to pardon myself from Rizooka as I get up and walk over. What do you see, Sinsong? I ask in Cantonese. Oh, are you from Hong Kong? The woman asks while the man looks away. They asked for the katsu udon and I ordered it for them. The elder lady asks if I understood them and I said yes. She beamed, saying that she is glad that I was there to help. The couple from Hong Kong joined tables with us after Rizuka said she didn't mind in English. The couple straightened themselves out with formal English, almost like they were imitating high society, and they said it as, "It is a pleasure to meet you." Rizu and I exchange glances and she tells me to put my hand on the table in Japanese. When I do it, she holds it, rubbing my fingers. "Oh, are you his girlfriend?" the woman asked. "Yes," Rizu smiled. "Wow, you are so pretty," the man said. "You are like a model." The woman then glared at him, and somehow I'm reminded of men in porno hovering around women as they say how beautiful they are and then asking about when they first had sex and if it felt good. The women only say thank you and answer all shy and coy before slowly removing their clothes, undoing the clasps in their bra, rolling their panties off to stand naked. "Boyfriend, please come here," Rizu turned to me. "Huh?" Before I knew it, she snuggled herself onto my neck, planting a peck, but before I could even say anything, her lips bloomed into 1,000 kisses. My breathing became ragged, trying to suppress my giggles until she drew back. A thread tethered that little lagoon she left on my neck to her lip, and she merely places the folded napkin on the table on it. Embarrassed, the man looked away, pretending that nothing happened, but the woman only stared, saying, "Wow, she's so sexy." Maybe being compared to a model would always place Rizu as this remote being in the same way as imagining someone having a better life, knowing they won't enter the life of the observer, that real life where nothing happens. The couple, Simon and Jordana, were from Lok Fu and Kowloon, tall apartment towers swathed in forests with tennis courts and soccer fields. Rizu said it reminds her of California, hot sun and beaches with vast fields of green. California anywhere, at any time. Simon asks me about what I do, and when I tell him, he says I should consider buying property in Japan with a declining yen. When I politely evaded him by saying that I'll keep that in mind, he fishes out his business card and says that he specializes in stocks and tells me to give him a call if I'm looking to make investments. Giordana scolds him for thinking so much about business when he's on vacation. Eventually, they ask about going to one of the sightseeing spots, which Rizu types into their phone, and they thank us before getting the bill. "How interesting," she said in Japanese. "Are people from Hong Kong like this?" "Just some business cornballs who play sports on the weekend or some shit." "Cornball?" "Yeah, like ordinary. Corny motherfucker." "A cornball's not ordinary. Corn is shaped like this." She puts her hands out to the equivalent length of a cob. "Right, well, that's another word for you. Do you say motherfucker when you're teaching?" "No. You wish. If so, then society here would be real progressive." After a warm bowl of udon and katsu, we get the bill on a black tray and I pay it down with some yen on hand. The shopkeeper thanked us as we left. Rizu and I held hands within the shade of low buildings. Cool winds shooed away the company of the sunlight's heat that clung to our sticky limbs. The faint tan on Rizu's face seemed to awaken a life that glowed in the small blush on her cheeks. Gentle light warmed her eyes where this little town might have seemed like every other town in her mind, a little town only she could see. I wondered if I was a resident in that town, or if any of her clients were there too. We look at each other and gaze even when we weren't looking, not even minding what was in front of us, and seeing her, it seemed like she walked this town alone, and perhaps with that, we understood something. "I really like looking at you," I said. "Haha, what a funny thing to say." "No, I guess I mean, it's like, I'm looking at you, and it feels like nothing has to matter, as long as you're there in the world. I know this is still kind of like work for you. You do this often, but I hope you're enjoying yourself." Rizu blinks, thinking of something. "I am. I try to have fun no matter who I'm with, even when it's hard to. This isn't hard. I'm really enjoying myself." "Well, I am too." "You are sweet," she said, leaning her shoulder on me. "You'll get neck pain. Give me a massage later then. A real one." "Okay." Later, Rizu and I go to the town square. A few people walk around while others kneel on the railings around a tree. K-cars with sliding doors set up various dessert stalls, like one for ice cream mochi. When I order, I look at the signboard and walk to the stall. Can I get a... I struggle for the word for strawberry until Rizu walks up beside me. One strawberry, one mango, please, she said in Japanese. Sure, coming right up, the vendor said after I paid the end. Thanks. Of course, she said, wrapping her hands around my waist, leaning her head on my chest, and I stroke her hair. When we get the mochi ice cream, we have some, and then as I bite into the ice cream, my lips cold, drops of pink on them. I call Rizu. Yeah? I peck her cheek and she recoils. Hey, you'll get me all sticky, she said until she realized what she said. Oh, you! Fuck you, fuck you, fuck you, fuck you! Alright, I'm sorry. No, I won't forgive you. Please, you can see my face or something. Stop it. We're in public. You're such a pervert. Alright, hold on. I'll wipe it off, I said, getting some alcohol wet wipes from my pocket. When I try to wipe it off, she snatches it out of my hand and wipes it herself. Well, at least you have that prepared, so maybe I won't be so mad at you. Well, please redeem me, Angel. Shut up, she said. Hey, can I take a picture with the insects? Am I gonna get charged? No, this is for me, if that's okay. No, yeah, go ahead. She takes the camera with one hand and pulls me beside her. My face touches hers, and her cheek is still a little sultry. After the flash goes off, she takes a Polaroid and smiles a little before pocketing it. After, she asks me if I want to go to a karaoke bar. We drive the Honda Beat to the town's main street. Tabs of gold glittered off the guardrail from the setting sun. Darkness throbs between the beam of streetlights until the glow stretches out to sculpt the high-rise in the town center. Shops have their shutters down while bulb marquees highlighted large sign menus on the sidewalk. Karaoke was at a tall building beveled at the corner like crystals shining through the bands of rock. The entrance seemed to split two flat faces of the crystal. Marble statues of nude women holding an urn at her shoulder, standing in the lobby where I buy an hour package from the clerk in a red suit vest before being told our room is the seventh one down the hall, thudding with other people singing love ballads and J-pop songs. Entering the insulated room, sofas sit flush around the room's perimeter. A painting of a ship hangs on a black column protruding out of the walls, dappled in bouquets from the disco ball spinning cheaply on the ceiling. We go through the song list, and all the songs I know are from several years ago. Rizu goads me to sing some Japanese songs, and I stutter through most of them when I have to squint for the hiragana over kanji I don't know. When it's Rizu's turn, she tells me to bring my phone on a second. Can you look up the instrumental for the song Basic Bitch Tear Gas by JPEG Mafia? Sure. Guitar's plugged to a down-tempo beat, and she speaks, letting her words trail off into a little melody as she turns to me, stiff but only sways side to side while holding onto the microphone as the music strains on my phone speaker and the chorus comes on. So no, I don't want your number, no. I don't want to give you mine, and no, I don't meet you nowhere, no. I don't want none of it. The menu on the TV only sits, waiting with its list of songs while the speakers blare her voice and I stand up, not knowing what I would do, and when she refrains her chorus, she reaches her hand out, and I take it, and we walk in a circle around the cubic table before she takes me close, placing my hand on her stomach. Wrapping my arm around her, she repeats the chorus even after the song ends. Breaths pulsing in these small movements. I try to think of some sync between each word that tell me more about her. As I cuddle her, nuzzling my head on her neck, there seemed some insistence that I wanted to kiss her neck and to take this further, but I merely wanted to hold on to this, merely being like a kind of sun who's raised and laced around her, keeping her warm in these AC-chilled rooms. You're like my stand, she whispered. Your stand? No, like stand. Like an anime? JoJo? I don't watch JoJo. That's so corny. You're corny holding me like that. This isn't a Valentine's Day song. I ain't no Valentine's subscriber. That's because you constantly want to have sex. Why not? And it went on like that until we sang the next song together, like it's some kind of credits. Even when we drive back, the lights of the town slip away into this faint pulse, as if a sleeping creature of light slunk in these back roads.
Absolutely fucking decadent. I love it. Really heavy, really adorable. That perfect fucking summer breeze dread. I loved it. I loved it.
Yeah.
Uh, thank you. No, yeah, I guess I've just been like working on a different style because like I write very like long and languid. I mean, like Gabe knows through it more like he had to
Yeah,
like sit
yeah.
through it. He had to sit through it all the time. So I guess I was trying to be a little bit more, I guess, concise. I mean, the kind of metaphor I use is like, are any of you familiar with Frank Ocean's Wise Man?
Mm-mm.
Okay, well, he did two renditions of the song. One is more melodic, and the other is like a lot more like rock kind of like oriented. And I guess like like in the chorus, like it around the chorus, like in the beginning, like he was singing like wise man closes his mouth, madman closes his fist, young man shows his age, judgment names sin. The strong man don't exist, no. Evil man exists. Weak men don't exist, no. Just flesh and blood exists. But then in like the Coachella version, it's more like wise man closes his mouth, madman closes his fist, young man shows his age, judgment named his sin. Strong men don't exist, no. Undying men exist. Evil men don't exist, no righteous men exist. Sad man cannot cry when man it's place where man can see. Never witnessed father weep. His old man call weep, but strong men don't exist, no undying. But I bet your mother will be proud of you. She would be proud. And your mother would be proud of you. She would be proud. The beast will crawl this earth and fall to the dirt to feed the crows. They'll rip apart his flesh till all that's left is glorious bone. But you bury your own to vain. You are now unsold. Like that, that, like kind of merging like the kind of both the melody and the kind of like frenetic nature of like of those deliveries. So like that's the kind of like two styles I'm kind of running with, as well as just trying to balance like different like character dynamics, even if it's somewhat like perverted. I can't doubt that.
No, it really works. I think it is that kind of perverted is I think like a really classic novelistic perversion that like that a certain kind of just like not idealized thing, but a kind of
Aestheticized.
no,
No.
it's
Okay,
not.
not. Yeah.
No,
Well, if
that's
you
not.
use
I mean, a particular kind of tenderness.
right,
That I have seen usually not done this well, but I was thinking about that with the pacing. I know you said like, oh, trying to be more like staccato than your usual. I definitely got that in terms of like, I don't know. It read like just narrator character having this really, really, really dense, drippingly rich day and trying to say it all as fast as possible, getting tangled in all the details, but like needing to say it quickly to like have it
right.
out of him for some reason. And oh, it was delicious. Yeah, that line really stood out to me about I forget like the city lights reducing into like a kind of pulse and like like the Joni Mitchell song about a parking lot. I read that as like Fairies sings the blues specifically, which might be her most depressing song ever. Just I love that.
Thank you. No, yeah. What was it? Yeah, I thought about that song a bit, like not just in this, but there was another work that I was working on as well. Just like, I mean, especially my boy in California, like he grew up in like the San Jose area, and he would tell me like stories where just like in California they just like demolish entire mountains, and
Yeah.
that shit would just like turn into parking lots, and like just like in that song, albeit I heard the one from like was it Counting Crows or whatever? It was one of those early 2000s like rock bands that covered the song, and I was like,
Holy shit. That's
yeah,
bold.
yeah, they covered the song, and that was the only way I knew of it until like much later I found out, oh shit, it's a Joni Mitchell song.
Yeah,
Real shit.
yeah. Yeah, Hijira might be my favorite. I love that one.
Yeah, but no,
Joni
yeah, I
Mitchell
get.
rocks. I think she gets the pass to like talk about how she has more Jellens.
I guess my question then, after all this, like, is there anything that you feel like might be underexplored, or like things that I should I guess consider going forward, just because like no, yeah, I guess like this might be the first time that I'm actually showing my work to you, like Amara. So like I guess like no, yeah, like I'm interested to see like different perspective directions that like to take both this style and both this kind of just this kind of like world, I suppose.
I really like the sensuality of it. Again, descriptions of I forgot the names already. But
Oh,
descriptions of the girl. Um,
Rizoka, yeah.
yeah, that's what it was. That combined with again, I get a really strong sense. I don't know if this is right, but just one of those like just again, just nectar dripping, almost going rotten type of summer day. where you're just walking on pavement all fucking day. I really enjoyed your little scene setting descriptions. I think I've tried to cultivate an approach of just like cramming as much description and texture into objects as possible that like has me kind of underrate and underappreciate stuff like how quickly you moved between locations here. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
You didn't need to go into like the patina and the pattern and the weight of the udon bowls, like just them being present in like the crawl of that day, like went a really long way.
and also
Those are things
dialogue
I'm
is
thinking
carrying a
about.
lot of weight. Like,
Yes, especially in contrast to just like the scenery description. Again, seeing how like gruff and kind of like yeah, whatever he is in like a just barely cringe way, and how just like genuinely like it's hard to tell when she's being cutesy versus genuinely naive, and like despite those like still being able to talk to each other like really coherently and get each other.
the
Again
stand bit
compared
is
with
brilliant.
yes,
Oh, which one?
The
compared with like the
stand bit.
rich,
Oh,
rich way he's like
Yeah.
thinking about and like lost in his own memory prematurely of the day. Like,
Yes, the dialogue did stand out to me. I think more than your previous stories that you shared, and I think it's just because of it's just more, yeah, more I guess blunt, more heavy. Um, Someone said sensual, yeah, right.
Yeah.
I don't know. It's that kind of it's that dialogue that always gets to me, and so that's really what stood out.
hmm. Thank you. Actually, the oh wait, well, I'll probably bring that up later, just because like this is like a sequel story to another work that I'm working on, like particularly thinking about uh, particularly thinking about for example, things a normal not like a normal life, an endless everyday, as well as like its attachments to things like, for example, pornography, particularly like JAVs. Um, Although that's more stressed on like in the previous one, like this one is like more of like thinking of it akin to like something like Love and Pop. I mean, Holmes, you know this. Like we watched Love and Pop
yes,
together with Ixon.
yeah. Yeah, even just that, ugh, yeah, the Love and Pop comparison, especially just again, the city trawl, just being out there on foot.
I would also like to note, kind of ripping off of what Amara is saying here, that there's this interesting tension also between like not just naivete and what's actually like a genuine tender moment, but also like how much is her actually legitimately like just doing a job versus something that's actually in excess of what that job is. Like when she said, when like the moments of her trying to communicate, no, seriously, dumbass, I actually like being around you. How much of that is actually genuine and how much of that is just kind of part of, for lack of a better term, the kayfabe of the situation.
Yeah,
Right.
that was one of the things I liked about it too. Just like I think that question is again does loom large in anything tackling the archetype. But I don't know. I think there's something like even more textured in like the ability to well, maybe not the ability to trust, but like the ability for a narrative to suggest that like this isn't our first discussion of the morality of this. This isn't the classic tropes of that. And like whoever is here has like been here this long for a reason. I get not for a reason, but like long enough to know where they
Understand what it means
are.
to them.
Yeah, I think that's a big reason why Honora went so far for me. That where like you don't get the like justification of it or the tragedy of it. You get it as like a real life and like the experience that comes with that life. I don't know. I really I appreciate that stuff.
I always liked about Love and Pop. Holmes and I talked about this with Ixon. It's just the way that like this like, because usually whenever it comes to things like things like, say, like Enjo Kosai or whatever, or prostitution or anything like that, usually it's portrayed in like a very kind of sometimes like over dramatic, sometimes like there's still like a level of like shame and like disgust level to it. Maybe disgust might be too strong, but there's like a level of like there's no consideration that that perhaps like that these people are just like living like are just like living their lives, dog. Like
Exactly. And I really think like when you do fall into just like again the disgust or justification camps, like yeah, you can write morality plays about it and you can write cautionary tales about it and you can write epic girl boss stuff about it. But you can't write shit like that guy with the briefcase of vials. You can't get
The
to that
grapes.
kind of thing.
The grapes.
Ugh.
That was such a scene, dog.
Yeah,
That
I think
was
about
You
that a
mean
lot.
you mean like the kind of like the problem where you're writing kind of like short circuits, and to get to the point,
Yeah,
and
you have a
it's
quota
kind
to
of
fill.
like
You
yeah
need to make your point and you need to do it in the right amount of chess moves. You don't have time to like that.
yes exactly. Um, it's strange. I've been dealing with this tension for a long time where I know that whoever I'm writing to is always impatient and they always want me to get to the point. But at the
Mhm.
same time, I want to kind of like force them occasionally to just say, okay, calm down. Um, or let your guard down for just 1 second. Um, but it's very difficult to handle. And I think we've seen a lot of cases where writers just kind of give up. And it's not even it's not like a
Mhm.
politics thing or a morality thing. Like, or at least not like not only that. It's also uh, it's also like a stylistic thing where
Mhm.
someone like writes in a way where it's like, oh, I'm being completely, and like this can be thought of ethically or politically too, but I'm thinking of this stylistically. Like someone could be, oh, I am like saying what's on my mind. I'm being authentic. I'm telling the truth. Here it is. Here it is.
Mhm.
And like I'm giving it to you, and like of course, you're kind of like forced to kind of like focus on that. But think about how much you're leaving out in that process. Now, it may be a kind of, I guess, claustrophobic, effect that, maybe achieves something. But oftentimes, it just, like, strangles whatever you wanted to kind of get out there in the first place.
Yeah, yeah, I really feel that. Again, like you said, like not necessarily like political or ethical, but just like how do I say this? Very self-conscious. You know what I mean? Like very aware of
Yeah.
perception almost over like what you actually want to do. Like
Yes,
worrying about how you're going to be read more than what you want to write.
yes, this is a definitely I've heard of like the MFA kind of like writing style, um, and it's kind of like defined by this very self-conscious, you know, uh, uh, I guess, overly self-conscious style,
Mhm.
that um, doesn't really take many risks, and kind of tries to get to the point just immediately.
Yeah,
Um,
exactly.
uh,
On that note, actually, just like actually, one of the things that was kind of like one of the shortcomings of Love and Pop, Holmes, you might be able to like attribute this to a little bit, is that, well, I was thinking more about it now. It's just like near the end when that guy like when that guy at the very end of Love and Pop like comes in with a taser and is like and is like admonishing admonishing the girl, saying isn't someone going to be sad that you're that you're doing this? While effective, I do feel like it low key front bears all the narrative tension into that specific moment in a way, because just because throughout it seems like the tension was regarding compensating dating was always kind of running under the surface, and then having these sudden violent spikes in particularly with the guy in the DVD shop. But then at the end, having that be so upfront, while effective, and I understand why it's there, it does feel like it's taking too much of the tension. You know what I mean?
I can see that. Yeah, partially. Yes, again, partially it has to justify its title. I feel like that's a lot of what it comes from. But oh man, yeah, I have to think about that.
Yeah, I mean, I would say it's hard to tell because it is the final third of the film, and so there is at least some room for the quote-unquote tension of this moment to actually spike. Although there is always a little bit of a barely avoided reckoning with the kind of seedier aspects of this until, and I've mentioned this in the chat that you, Ixon, and I have had after watching it, is that it's very noticeably, this tension only becomes obvious when the main character is doing this alone by herself without her group of friends as a kind of buffer around this.
Yeah.
So there is... admittedly, the last third of it is, in my opinion, the weakest third of it, but I think it's made even weaker, honestly. If it were just a moment of, okay, here is the worst possible example of this happening, it just had to be a kind of traumatic moment that then gets processed kind of later through the man that she hands the cell phone back over to, and kind of is discussing some of the elements of what happened with this guy as he's kind of lamenting. Yeah, I really do love that scene. It's a very lovely little bit for the horrors that happened before. But I think really what makes it into this cliche or kitsch is when she takes out what she thinks is going to be the roll of film and then winds up being a letter from this guy who basically explains why he spared her, essentially, and saying by the way, I'm going to tell you what my name of my pet animal that you repaired is, and its name is Love and Pop, which is the title of the film. It's okay,
yeah, we had the title already. It really is crazy remembering that is really the a third of the whole film, because all I remember is the walk back home and the train scene and the taser, and I don't remember anything else of what happened there when I think back on it.
Yeah, because the first half, the first 3/4 were very strong throughout. Even with the tension in tow, it was always generally pretty smooth. Although then again, that could get into the argument where it's these spikes of violence are how it happens, which it's fair, but at the same time it could still be argued that it's still being used to leverage forced drama. It's kind of similar with Spec Ops Line with the white phosphorus scene. As much as I understand why the scene is there, but it's but it kind of balks at the face of the strength of that game, and in turn with Love and Pop, the strength of that movie. You feel more of the tension with the guy with the grapes and the vials, what's this? Yeah, when the main character, even when they got the money for that ring, she's she doesn't want she doesn't want it because she feels they're she feels like she'd just be taking the money from them. And then just small stuff where just that dumbass salaryman walks up to them going hey, do you want to go on a date? I have a Honda NSX, I have VBS rims, and just this is this is the most Blue Ratchet skit in Japan of all time.
Okay, I need to hop off for a moment, but I'll try to be right back.
Sure. Yeah, I mean, it's already gone pretty long, so I could stop recording.
What